is called to order. The secretary will note the roll. We will start out with introductions of ourselves and the legislative districts, and then we'll do introductions of staff since this is the first convening of our committee this legislative session. So without further ado, my name's Matt Gress. I represent Legislative District 4, which includes Scottsdale, Arcadia, Paradise Valley, and North Phoenix, and I'm in my first term, so I was elected in 2022. So excited to begin my second year of my first term. Representative Schwiebert.
Thank you, Chairman Gress. My name is Judy Schwiebert. I'm very honored to represent my district from North Phoenix, District 2. It includes Thunderbird Road north to the 303, 32nd Street to 43rd Avenue, which includes Paradise Valley, Deer Valley, Moon Valley, all the valleys. And this is my second year in my second term.
Excellent. Representative Parker.
Representative Barbara Parker from Legislative District 10, which covers some of the areas in question that we'll be talking about today. That's mostly northeast Mason, a part of Apache Junction, covering a tiny bit of Pinal County and Maricopa.
All right, and we'll have staff introduce themselves to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, members, my name is Chase Hauser. I'm the Senior Research Analyst for the Committee on Education. I will also be staffing this committee, and this will be my 6th legislative session. Thank you.
Good morning, members. My name is Nicole Lovato. I staff the House Democratic Caucus on Commerce, Ways and Means, and I also back up on budget, which is why you see me here today. This will be my 5th legislative session. I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you.
Hello, members. My name is Emmy Wiest. I'm a student at ASU, double majoring in creative writing and anthropology. I'm a policy intern for the House Democrats. Excited to serve.
This should be a fun committee.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Hunter Hedelius. I'm a House Page, and I recently graduated from ASU with concurrent degrees in Justice Studies and Spanish.
Hi, I am Nathaniel Garcia. I am a House Page at the service of you all. I am double majoring in electrical engineering and economics at ASU.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Amanda Strickland, and this is my 8th session.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. All right. We'll do 5-minute opening statements for the members, and then we will move into the presentations. The hearing today is the committee's second on the topic of homelessness and housing. Last September, we convened in Scottsdale to review what many have considered is a troubling direction that local governments have taken in addressing homelessness, namely taking people living on the streets and placing them in hotel rooms next to unsuspecting paying guests. We heard that what this approach has turned into from Erica Sandberg, a San Francisco investigative journalist who described herself as, quote, the ghost from Christmas future, end quote, when it comes to failed homelessness policies, having seen her city descend into blight and lawlessness. She warned us that while it might be noble to take people off the streets and provide them shelter, without significant structure and accountability, this kind of program simply amounts to warehousing our homeless population. We also heard from Lisa Chastain, who heads the Gospel Rescue Mission in Tucson. She shared one of the best case studies I've seen when it comes to converting entire hotels into shelter and treatment centers. Gospel Rescue Mission is the center for emergency beds, transitional housing, government services, community college training, sober living facilities, a medical clinic, and soon a kennel and addiction and detox facilities. There are strict rules, including bedroom checks, drug and alcohol testing, and required participation in workforce training. Guests, as Lisa calls those who stay at Gospel Rescue Mission, deserve the same dignity and respect as the rest of us. And with that dignity and respect, comes expectations that these same individuals follow the rules and the law like the rest of us. Jared Meyer from the Cicero Institute testified on what are must-haves in any homelessness program, and accountability and a constant eye on the types and timeliness of outcomes are key. Finally, Scottsdale Mayor David Ortega joined the hearing, yet unfortunately dug in and defended the program as a success, even though he couldn't define what success meant after participants left Ortega's hotel rooms. Nor could he provide specifics on the population his city actually served over the past year, or accurately admit to his plans to serve a new population this year. They included individuals living in the infamous zone and foreign nationals that would have otherwise been deported under the now expired Title 42. These programs lacked any real semblance of accountability, including verified sobriety through room checks for drugs and drug paraphernalia, and daily meetings with caseworkers. Healing was not taking place in this program. This time last year, the zone continued to spiral out of control, seemingly unabated. Now, thanks to the courts stepping in to intervene, the city of Phoenix was forced to finally act and empower our law enforcement to clear up what had become a crime-ridden, open-air drug use zone. It was the hottest spot for crimes against people, according to the Phoenix crime statistics. And most of those crimes were being committed against the homeless themselves. Today, the number of crimes and arrests in the area has fallen dramatically as individuals living in the zone have been dispersed elsewhere. And that is the focal point of this hearing today. Where did they go? What services are they getting? How are we measuring what success looks like? What level of coordination is occurring among the public and nonprofit human services agencies? In last year's budget, the state appropriated $210 million to address homelessness and housing, an unprecedented investment. When we award dollars, are we looking at the cost effectiveness of options presented? Are we building new government-owned housing in lieu of trusting the private sector? Taxpayers have a right to know where, how, and why their dollars are being spent on this effort. I'm also very interested in the community courts approach, and Mesa is going to be here to talk about that. I understand that the city of Phoenix is adopting a community courts approach as well, modeled off of the city of Mesa's. In my view, this is an incredibly important tool to help our vulnerable population suffering from addiction and mental illness. If used appropriately, bringing together law enforcement, the criminal justice system, and our human services agencies can make all the difference. So thank you all for being here today. And with that, Representative Schwiebert, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Chairman Gress for holding this really important meeting, and to the Department of Housing, the City of Mesa, and others who are here to share their work to address the increasing number of people experiencing homelessness in our states. Because this is not just an issue affecting downtown areas like the zone. The rise in the number of people living on our streets and in our washes is the number one concern I hear about from my North Phoenix constituents, and I agree. In fact, Arizona's homelessness crisis is among the worst in the nation. While rates remained relatively flat across the nation, Arizona saw a 23% increase between 2020 and 2022 in the number of homeless people on our streets, and another 5% increase this past year in the number of people experiencing homelessness. The causes vary. According to the former director of housing, Tom Simplot, Arizona is an outlier because of its dire shortage of affordable housing that has led to skyrocketing rents and housing prices that are leaving too many people without a safe place to live. working families with children, veterans, and seniors who on fixed incomes have become the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. And we know, yes, that people experiencing addiction and mental health issues are driving factors in this crisis as well. That's why I'm really proud to have helped successfully push for a historic $150 million deposit into the Housing Trust Fund and $60 million in emergency shelter service funds in this year's budget. I'm so grateful to the many service organizations, the cities, and the counties who are on the ground doing heroic work to address the wide variety of individual needs leading to homelessness. There is no one silver bullet cause or solution. We need different solutions for different populations. I look forward to learning from our Director of Housing, who solicited input from so many great organizations to address the crisis as effectively as possible and learn how we can continue to support their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schwiebert. Representative Parker.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Some of this issue affects my neighborhood and my legislative district. One of the things I think that needs to be on the record very, very clearly as a state government and a state legislature is that cities, towns, communities, and municipalities are subsets of the state. So that we, as the state, the umbrella over the cities, towns, and counties, you are a part of us, which means when we pass statutes, when we appropriate money, the cities and towns have to be responsible to that and accountable and transparent. With the situation of some of the appropriations and with what we're going to be talking about from the Department of Housing and the Homeless Hotel and the Grand and the Windermere and examples of that, and a response we received back from the city of Mesa, which I will address since that's where I'm from. I think some of the cities thought they could ignore the legislature with impunity. That means without fear of responsibility, that they could take the money, make changes, and with impunity, think that they didn't have to answer back to the legislature. Well, you will find that that is not the case, and this legislative session will show that. And one of the purposes of these hearings is because we have a responsibility to the citizens of Arizona and the taxpayers of Arizona to make sure that the cities and towns and counties are being responsible with your hard-earned tax dollars. Now, another thing that can never happen is that cities and towns can't misinterpret or misrepresent the situation. And one of the community members that was greatly affected by the decisions that were made in the city of Mesa was not here today. She has sent in a signed, sworn affidavit notarized with her testimony and her statement. And I will take some of my remarks from her. Keep in mind, when the city made these decisions, they went to the community members, as they should, the taxpayers, the citizens, the surrounding communities, and they said, here's what's happening. Here's what we're going to do. And they presented the idea and repeated it in several documents that they handed out to all the citizens in Mesa, in my legislative district. They stated that the purpose of what they were doing and promised that they were to house only seniors, disabled veterans, women with children of domestic violence, and single women. That they repeated over and over again to the citizens in documents that was the purpose of this. To which all the residents said, we would love to do anything we could for that vulnerable population. Absolutely. To help the seniors, the disabled veterans, the women with children, domestic violence, and single women that are displaced and homeless. They would love that. But that was not the case. In fact, when they met with police officers in the city of Mesa, They said, if that's the demographic and the population, your hotel will be empty. And then they made a contract with an organization, a public partnership, with Community Bridges, Inc. Now, although there may be people that have benefited from Community Bridges, Inc., on Community Bridges, Inc., on their own very website, they state that their entire purpose is for drug abuse, rehab, and crime referrals, and police referrals. So, we have to ask ourselves, does the City of Mesa believe that seniors, disabled veterans, women with children, domestic violence, and single women are all on drugs? Or all have behavioral health problems? Because that's the only purpose to partner with CBI, behavioral health, drug addiction, and criminal problems. Is that what the City of Mesa believes, that women and who are getting away from an abused spouse or a veteran who's out on the streets because he can't afford his home, that he has automatically needs a lockdown facility? So there was the problem, the disingenuous. So in conclusion, let me just state that we need to be very clear about addressing our problems, and we did speak to the City of Mesa about the changes the Department of Housing made in relocating people from the zone and foreign nationals, which also was not the legislative intent of why we appropriated the money. So I'll turn the time over. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Parker. Next up, we'll have a presentation from the Joint Legislative Budget Committee staff.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. For the record, Cameron Mortensen, JLBC staff. Mr. Chair, we were asked to provide a summary of the Housing Trust Fund deposit in FY 2024 to go over the reporting requirement footnote that accompanied that appropriation and an update to this point. Mr. Chair, as stated, the FY 2024 budget appropriated $150 million into the Housing Trust Fund as a fund deposit. As a part of this appropriation, there was a footnote that stated that by September 1st, the department shall submit an expenditure plan report to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee. On September 1st, the JLBC received this submission. The submission included information on past and future stakeholder meetings, information on a website link to solicit input, and plans to complete a needs assessment, create funding categories, and create notice of funding availabilities that they would post and entities could apply to. On September 18th, we replied to the department's report to inform them that the report, although didn't include any planned expenditures either by category or by recipient. So on September 18th, JLBC replied to the department asking for a resubmission that included expenditure plans. We consulted with Ledge Council, and they provided their perspective that it didn't seem to be an expenditure report, but there's no statutory definition they know of that includes what should be in an expenditure report. On September 29th, the department responded stating that the submission on September 1st complied with the footnote, but they were happy to give further information after allocations have been made. And then we can move to number 7, December 19th. After asking for an update, the department notified JLBC staff of a link to their website, which posted all of the notice of funding availabilities that were currently active. These notice of funding availabilities, as I stated before, are posted. Entities can then come and apply, and the department reviews, accepts, or denies based on the criteria. Mr. Chair, currently there are $102 million of planned allocations listed on the department's website. I have them all listed on the handout. The big three are $36 million to 4% low-income housing tax credit projects, gap financing for those projects. So the state provides additional funding and incentive for entities that are using federal low-income housing tax credit dollars. So there's $36 million for the 4% projects, $25 million for the 9% projects, and $25 million for the development of transitional housing. And additionally, there are $16 million in smaller numbers of other notice of funding agreements. Mr. Chair, only 3 of the notice of funding availabilities specifically reference the $150 million deposit, and those total $12 million. So it is unclear whether the other notice of funding agreements are coming from the $150 million deposit or from other sources of the Housing Trust Fund revenue that include annual unclaimed property, loan repayments and interest, and fees from IDA's single family mortgage program. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions about the Housing Trust Fund. I'm also happy to expand a little on the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund as well.
Oh, go ahead with the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund.
Okay. Mr. Chair, in that same budget last year, $40 million, while the Human Services Budget Reconciliation Bill created the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund, and then the FY 2024 budget appropriated $40 million to that fund. The prescribed use of this fund is to award grants to counties, cities, towns, tribes, and nonprofit organizations for programs that provide shelter and services to unsheltered persons who are experiencing homelessness. Additionally to this $40 million, there's a $20 million supplemental for FY 2023, and these monies did not technically go in the fund because the fund hadn't been created yet, but they were prescribed for the exact same purpose as the fund. Mr. Chair, we received an update of expenditures on December 19th, the same day that we received the link to the postings of the notice of funding agreements. I did see this morning a press release that expanded further on planned Homeless Shelter and Services Fund expenditures, so the department would probably be able to expand on that better than I could.
Mr. Mortensen, so how much has been expended from the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund?
Mr. Chair, when we received the update on December 19th, it was $1.3 million, although the press release that I saw this morning seemed like it announced more than that, but I haven't had time to really review it yet.
In terms of expended versus encumbrance, do you know how much has been encumbered? I know that they've awarded at least round 1. It sounds like this press release is round 2. I'll ask the agency.
Sure.
No worries. So, Mr. Mortensen, does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. How do you define an expenditure? How do you define an expenditure plan when you're reviewing documents?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not gonna say how I think the legal definition of the expenditure plan is, because I don't have that background, don't have that knowledge. But if you were to ask me as a staff member if I knew how the $150 million was going to be spent, I would say I couldn't tell you.
Well, let me ask you this, and that's helpful. Have you seen an expenditure plan before?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
What does it look like?
Typically, the expenditure plans that we typically report or receive, include either categories or individual agencies or individual entities that are receiving monies and the purpose of that.
And have you seen expenditure plans that have been very detailed, and you've seen expenditure plans that have been broad? I mean, they range the gamut, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Did you share kind of what your JLBC's expectation would be for an expenditure plan with the Department of Housing?
Mr. Chair, on September 18th, we did in our response, we stated that our understanding was that the expenditure report needed to include the planned expenditures.
Were you specific of saying you need to show the recipients, or do you just need to show big buckets of money that you plan to allocate, or you kind of were vague and deferred to the agency?
We were not specific in our request, just that we expected the report to include planned expenditures.
Okay. And I'll just say, it seems to me that they were in the process of gathering stakeholder input. Maybe they didn't have the full scope of what they wanted to spend. But I will say, it's from a JLBC perspective, it is somewhat difficult if you're trying to oversee, a state fund program via press release or just going to the website and looking at NOFAs. It's easier if the agency does provide that information to you in kind of a summary form, at least so that you can keep track. If the department had presented the information that you outlined in number 8, you have specific dollar amounts that presumably you collected from their website.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
If they had just sent this to you in a one-pager, would that have given you a sense of a general expenditure plan, or it could have been one form of an expenditure plan?
Mr. Chair, yeah, from a staff perspective, it would provide more details on the planned expenditure than what we had before.
And have you seen agencies come back with expenditure plans previously submitted to provide more detail on how they've spent these dollars, including recipients, et cetera, once awards are made?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have received updates before.
Okay. And the last question I have is, you mentioned that you don't know, of the $102 million, how much is attributed to the $150 million deposit versus the normal revenue that comes in from the unclaimed properties or the carry forward balance. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Do you know, and you may not know this, what the carry forward balance was that was unencumbered?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I have this. According to the department's budget request, the fund balance at the end of FY 2023 was $86 million.
Okay. And I'm sure the department will tell us how much of the $86 million was already encumbered. So, okay. All right. Thank you very much. Members, any questions for JLBC staff? All right. Thank you very much. We'll now go to the Department of Housing. All right, CEO Joan Service, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Let me get my paperwork together. I will be running my own site. Is that correct? That's fine. I just wanted to verify that. Good morning, members. It is still morning. Good morning, members of the House Appropriation Subcommittee on Budgetary Funding Formulas. For the record, my name is Joan Service, and I am the CEO of the Arizona Department of Housing. It's an honor to be here today to provide an overview of the department and an update on state funding for affordable housing and ending homelessness. Perfect. In responsibly rolling out our state's precious resources, ADOH's timeline included extensive stakeholder outreach, feedback consolidation and research, and then formal notices of funding availability. Through those NOFAs, funds were released in a transparent manner and awarded based on procurement scoring and standards defined in the said NOFAs. By this week, all funding will be out via a NOFA, with the exception of a $9 million tribal set-aside, with the majority of funds finalized by the end of February. ADOH, as has been mentioned, has completed extensive stakeholder feedback, which included 10 stakeholder sessions with over 400 participants, as well as an open proposal process, which interested parties were encouraged to submit their project ideas. This process yielded 114 project submissions. This feedback was used to help inform the funding categories and the needs for our community. Since October, ADOH has released 14 NOFAs. Of these 14, 7 are still open for applicants. I want to note that this is a record number of NOFAs, and I want to thank each and every ADOH staff member that has worked so hard over the last 3 months to roll out so many different opportunities to our community. The link provided on the screen, which I know you can't click through, but hopefully you all have access to that hard copy. And you can copy and paste that. The link provided will take you to all interested parties to our active funding opportunities. I will share that when I came to the Department of Housing, it was very important to me to have a very transparent and accountable process through our funding opportunities. In an effort to increase transparency and accountability, ADOH has, for the first time ever, created a live funding tracker for state funding. You can visit our live funding tracker using the link on the screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Or just visit our website at housing.az.gov. This tracker also shows award progress and distribution of funds by county. ADOH has ongoing checks and balances along the life cycle of a project. As mentioned, the funding was open to the public through formalized NOFAs. Again, notice of funding availabilities. The funding is then formally awarded using the NOFA criteria. ADOH then drafts and executes contracts with the grantees. Once the contract is executed, ADOH begins performance management, which requires grantees to meet and report on their metrics on a bi-monthly basis. Grantees must submit a request for reimbursement with supporting documentation to receive funding. Every contract has specific measurements that are reported on a bi-monthly basis. Funding reimbursements is performance-based. Our contracts include provisions that require grantees to perform. If non-performance is an issue, the contract includes provisions to protect our state's resources. Thank you for your time this morning, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
All right. I'll start off with some questions, and then we'll kick it back and forth. So how much of the $150 million, you mentioned something earlier in your presentation that the last NOFA is going out this week?
Correct.
Okay. And that will consume the $150 million? The
NOFAs that by the end of this week, the NOFAs released will total $202.9 million. The only exception being that $9 million tribal set aside. And let me clarify that includes the Homeless Shelter Services Fund and the Housing Trust Fund dollars when I say the $202 million.
Okay, of just the Housing Trust Fund. You don't have to get back to me right now.
Okay.
But if you could just note, it's helpful for me because those two funds have different purposes.
Absolutely.
And it's helpful to just get an accounting of that.
Sure thing.
So I'll have some other questions in terms of that, which is how much of the Housing Trust Fund's been encumbered. Is all of the funding, presumably NOFAs mean that all of these funds are awarded competitively. Is that correct? With the exception of the tribal set-aside?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is correct. There are some, especially as it relates to the affordable housing NOFAs, they have prioritizations, and really what the competitiveness is the underwriting process. We have to make sure that they are viable projects.
So the affordable housing project, you said that that's not subject to competition. Why is that?
I'm sorry. Let me clarify, Mr. Chairman. All of the notices of funding availabilities that we have released have been to date oversubscribed. there is not, when I'm talking about the affordable housing NOFAs, I should have said the ranking and review, the ranking and review process is actually an underwriting process, not an actual like panel per se. But it's just that, you know, the crunching the numbers and making sure the performers are viable and that the project is sound.
Okay, just a couple more questions about the NOFAs. Outside of the affordable housing, the underwriting process, all of the other NOFAs will go through a scoring process of a panel. You'll review. It would be helpful to know the scoring matrix if you would be able to provide that to the committee. The statute governing the Housing Trust Fund requires the department to give priority to projects that provide for the operating, construction, or renovation of facilities for low-income families, and that providing housing and shelter to families with children. So how are your NOFAs structured in a way that complies with that current requirement in statute?
Mr. Chairman, well, I'm going to speak to your first point around the scoring criteria, and I'll just give you examples. Each NOFA does use scoring criteria to rank and award the funding. Because each NOFA is a different project, each NOFA has an outlined scoring criteria. An example would include, you know, does the program address identified needs? What's the program methodology, including outcomes? What's the program implementation, the budget, the applicant experience and capacity, and then applicant collaboration and leverage and sustainability.
But do any of the criteria, because this seems to be focused on low-income families and housing and shelter to families with children. So are those components of the scoring matrix where if the applicant has the facilities or a proposal to serve families and children, to Representative Parker's point, and I've heard this as well, what cities and towns have told us is that their ideal population would be families, specifically single mothers with children. The actual population seems to be different than what they want to serve. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have it. They would have a lot of vacant rooms if that's their limiting criteria. So how does that figure into the scoring? Do they get additional points if they have the capacity to serve families?
Mr. Chairman, what I will say is that, again, the scoring criteria, you know, each grantee has their own qualitative and quantitative response to the NOFAs that we stand up, and each grantee will have different projects or priorities that they want to focus on based on their experience and capacity to serve different populations. But again, as the Housing Trust Fund is statutorily noted, it must provide support for low-income families, and as such, our NOFAs, especially all of our Notice of Funding Availabilities, especially as it relates to the Housing Trust Fund dollars, do exactly that. Now, the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund, that was obviously statutorily in the budget talking about unsheltered individuals.
Okay. While we're talking about that, just one real quick point. In the JOBC handout on number 8, it $7 million, the 12-8 NOFA, rapid rehousing and supportive services for persons experiencing homelessness. Is that attributed to the HSSF or is that to the Housing Trust Fund?
That is attributed to the Housing Trust Fund.
Where in statute, because I'm reading in the statute that it says that the fund money, quote, shall be spent on approval of the department for developing projects and programs connecting with providing housing opportunities for low and moderate income households and for housing affordability programs. Does a person who is homeless qualify as a household?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to clarify, does a person who is homeless qualify as a household? Yes, according to federal HUD standards, yes, that is correct.
Okay. So why, just to make sure I understand that, why use the Housing Trust Fund to help people who are homeless versus helping people who do have houses and allowing for low to moderate income individuals or families to be able to get more permanent or affordable housing?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. As the NOFA specifies, the activity is called rapid, or is specific for rapidly rehousing individuals who were housed before, or experienced an episode of homelessness, but they just need whether it be rental assistance and or case management assistance to support them back into housing. So it is an affordable housing program.
So this NOFA, in order to use the monies, you would have to be living already in a facility or in an apartment or in a house, and that you're at risk of being evicted, and then you can tap into the $7 million?
Mr. Chairman, yes, and if you are showing up at a shelter and the targeted intervention of rapid rehousing recognizes that obviously each individual, each household has unique challenges. Okay. Could just rental assistance and case management get them rapidly back into housing and avoid the costly intervention of shelter?
Okay. I'll follow up at this point. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Schwiebert if she has questions. But I just want to make sure I understand the decision-making around Housing Trust Fund versus HSSF. To me, this would probably be if someone presents themselves and they're not living in a house, HSSF would probably be a more appropriate use, just on my reading of the statute governing the fund. But I understand your perspective is different. Representative Schwiebert.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. And thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us again how many applications you received and how much those all would have cost if you had been able to fund all of them?
Mr. Chair, Representative Schwiebert, I assume you're talking about the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Representative Schwiebert, the department received 113 applications for the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund, mm-hmm. And if we had the resources to fund each and every application, that would cost over $295 million.
Okay, and do I need to go back to each time? Okay. So,
no, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just going to give you about 7 minutes, and
okay.
That's yours.
I probably won't need all
okay.
7 minutes, but okay. So would you repeat that? 295 million. Do I have that right? Okay. So and how much again is in that fund for you to spend?
Mr. Chair, Representative Schwiebert, as of today, 0. But to the point that's made, the fiscal year 23 expenditures of the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund was $20 million. That has all been expended. And the fiscal year 24, $40 million has now been all awarded to applicants.
Okay, so you were able to award $60 million mm-hmm. out of $295 million in requests.
Correct.
Okay. So what are some of the considerations when you are looking at how to adequately fund people with emergency services? I understand Mr. Gress's point that, well, maybe some of those funds should have been spent out of the Housing Trust Fund or just in the emergency fund rather than the Housing Trust Fund. So can you somehow justify why you used some of the funds in the way you did?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwiebert, again, we held, I keep pointing back to the stakeholder feedback process that helped inform those funding categories and which funds should be used for which level of activities. Mm-hmm. Now, historically, the Department of Housing has funded rapid rehousing activities using Housing Trust Fund dollars, and so it was, akin to do it again through this process. And I believe, and again, I'm hoping maybe some of our housing stakeholders can speak to this, not being a practitioner myself. But rapid rehousing activities, I believe, from HUD's perspective, would also be considered more of a preventative, affordable housing activity instead of providing support and services to an individual experiencing homelessness.
Okay. So, I mean, and maybe this is something I need to ask one of the providers, but I'll go ahead and throw this question out to you. So when people are experiencing homelessness, is it generally, okay, it's a one-time thing and then they go back into being housed? Or is it sometimes a real bumpy road where they're in and out of housing? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure.
Ms. Service, I'm hearing from our broadcast services that it's hard to hear you, so if you could speak up.
I will eat the mic.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I might have to ask you to repeat it. I think I'll try and get there. Hopefully I answer your question.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Representative Schwiebert, so an individual experiencing if you've met one person experiencing homelessness, you've met one person experiencing homelessness.
Okay.
Everyone has a unique experience, and thankfully, based off of the amazing practitioners in our field, we are able to, the practitioners are able to end someone's homelessness quickly, and ultimately the goal is to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring. Mm-hmm. However, each individual has their own unique challenges that may have led them to experience this housing instability. And as such, the service provision is, matches whatever whatever they might be going through. So I think some shelter providers can attest to, seeing one individual or one family once, and that's, they were able to save up the resources to get back housed, and that's great. But again, our community, like across the nation, also has what's called chronic homelessness, so individuals that have more than one episode of homelessness.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds to me, if I can kind of interpret, that it's a pretty fuzzy line between the use of the Housing Trust Fund and the use of the Emergency Services Fund, that there are people who might be in both categories or at different times.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwiebert, when, as I mentioned the timeline, we saw all the feedback, and we did go through a process. At the department, we called it a war room process, where we really took all the proposals and put an actual delineation between what intervention would be more appropriate for the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund, because those interventions are best targeted to individuals who are unsheltered, and then what intervention or activity would be best funded from the Housing Trust Fund. Is there familiarity from the Housing Department to use this the Housing Trust Fund for this activity? So yes, it is somewhat fuzzy, but we also were deliberate in trying to create that delineation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk just a little bit more about some of the criteria that you used to decide on the awards?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwiebert, yes. Again, each NOFA had its own unique scoring criteria to rank an award. Some of the proposed scoring included, again, does this program address the identified need? What was the program methodology and outcomes? The experience and capacity of the applicant? As it relates to the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund, was the project shovel ready? Did it serve against the eligible population? And did it include services and shelter per the funding?
Thank you.
All right.
It sounds like it was a very thorough process. Thank you.
All right, Representative Parker, and you don't need to go through the chair every time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
That will make it very easy. Thank you very much. A couple of things that I think are very important to get on the record. And again, for everybody and for the record, just the proper role of government, a little civics lesson, if you will. The legislature is tasked as a legislative body to make law. And we make law and we appropriate money. The executive branch, of which your agency is a part of, has to follow through but follow the law. So my issue with this was, when we appropriated the funds, and I sit on appropriations with Representative Gress, when we appropriated the funds in the 2023, and I have the document from you, the Homeless Shelter and Services Notice of Funding Available, and when we wrote the law, and that happened to be in Bill 1720, where we created the Housing Shelter and Services Fund, our legislative intent, And the language in the statute we wrote, which is the law, which has to be followed, was very clear. It was, and I quote, for people who are experiencing homelessness. And all right, now put a period right there. It looks like, and again, this is on your page 3 here, but the Department of Housing took that to a different level and created, for eligibility for the grants, a criteria that you were going to prioritize the money we had appropriated. You state, for those cities that give us proposals serving those who came from the Title 42 and from the zone. Now, that, again, in and of itself, is a completely different situation. We never wrote that into 1720, that you could take the money and then you could appropriate it for Title 42 in the zone. How do you answer that addition to the law when you're not a lawmaking branch?
Mr. Chair, Representative Parker, thank you for that question. I will share that when the department allocated the resource, when we wrote the notice of funding availability, we mentioned these issues in the NOFA as they represented statewide headwinds that could be placing strains on our shelters in the human services system. However, I will share that ADOH's contracts with grantees included that option, but not a mandate, to assist eligible folks affected by the sober living closures, the efforts to close the zone, and the Title 42 expiration. Our contract does mandate the conformance with all applicable state laws.
Okay, can you see how that didn't quite get to the end of the row? Because the city of Mesa states that the services of the money appropriated from the grant was specifically going to seniors, disabled vets, women with children of domestic violence, and single women. And yet, the city of Mesa got very confused, obviously, because they stated in their contract with you, in paragraph A2 of page 30, that they would absolutely be accepting individuals who were relocating from the zone and Title 42. So my question is, do you see how that created a problem? Now, do you see the disconnect? For what they're telling the citizens, what we wrote in state law, what they followed what you did, you dangled that carrot that we'll give you this grant if you give it to those people. So they did it. And now we have your agency that didn't quite do what we said, and now the cities followed you and didn't do quite what we said. Because, again, to imply that the people in the zone and the people 42 is a domestic woman getting away from domestic violence, we're talking about different populations of people.
Mr. Chair, Representative Parker, again, and this is something that Representative Gress and I have exchanged correspondence around. Again, ADOH's contract with grantees included that option, but did not mandate. And as you've stated, the city of Mesa has, followed suit in that they have defined their population as seniors and as I'm sorry, I don't have the exact demographics that you mentioned, but seniors, domestic violence survivors. That is, I believe, and I'm going to let the city of Mesa speak for themselves, but I believe that's the population that they're serving. Now, again, ADOH's NOFA included that option, but not a mandate. The mandate that we did require is conformance with all applicable state laws.
Okay, yeah, and again, we'll ask the city of Mesa the same questions, but again, the city of Mesa, to apply for the grant in their own document, said to get the grant from you, the Department of Housing, they stated, we'll take people from the zone and Title 42. Now, what they told the citizens is they never told the citizens of Mesa what was in the grant request from ADOH and what they agreed to. They told the citizens of Mesa, this is only for the vets, our poor disabled vets, our seniors, our domestic violence, and our single women in Mesa who are not from the Phoenix zone, right? That's Phoenix, this is Mesa.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Parker, let me clarify to say that the city of Mesa was awarded the funds based off of their capacity to provide services to unsheltered homeless populations. They were not awarded the funds because of any mention of sober living closures, the zone, and Title 42. While they may have mentioned that in the application, that was not why that they were selected. They were selected based off their, again, the scoring criteria around capacity, experience, ability to expend the funds in a timely manner.
30 seconds.
Okay. With all due respect, your contract stated that you would prioritize people who took Title 42 in the zone, and they agreed and said they would do that, when none of that was the legislative intent.
All right.
May I ask a follow-up?
Yes, one follow-up.
Okay. Is it possible that there were disabled veterans or women with children escaping domestic abuse, and even people who came from Mesa who might have been in the zone at one point? Are those mutually exclusive?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwiebert, I can't speak to that, but I, as you know, as the document, the notice of funding availability that went out for the fiscal year 23 Homeless Shelter and Services Fund states, is that, you know, we recognize that the sober living home closure, the Title 42 expiration, and the efforts to close the encampment around the Human Services campus was putting strong strains on the shelter system. That's why it was mentioned, but again, not mandated.
Thank you.
And we'll do one round of follow-ups. But in the NOFA, the first NOFA that Representative Parker cited, you did note that you would prioritize proposals serving unsheltered persons who are impacted by the challenges that you mentioned regarding clearing of the zone and the expiration of Title 42. In your scoring criteria, did you give additional points for applications that said that they would serve those two populations?
Mr. Chairman, it is, I'm going to have to double check, but I think the answer is no. The scoring criteria for the first tranche of the Homeless Shelter and Services Fund was really prioritized on how can we expend these funds in an expeditious fashion based off the capacity of the entities that are applying.
Okay. I would be confused by that because the NOFA says you would prioritize, so I assume when you would score, that means you would give extra credit to those who do include that. And my understanding is that almost every application, if not all of them, did include some component that said they would serve individuals in the zone and Title 42 foreign nationals. To your point, you sent a letter to me later on, and we'll put this all on the record, that that said that you would not enforce that part of the contract. So the contract did include that as a requirement, but if someone didn't do it, they could technically be in breach of the contract if the granting party said as much, but you said you wouldn't enforce that.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. May I also clarify that not all of the applications specified that they would prioritize the populations, the sober living. It was just a handful, and I think we've shared that with your office as well.
Okay, thank you. Representative Parker for one more follow-up.
Yes, and let me just clarify real quick a couple of things. I'm also vice chair on Health and Human Services, so we're keenly aware of various different populations. Mm-hmm. And again, homelessness and people that are experiencing homelessness, there are very different categories. And there's very different. We're absolutely wanting everybody that needs a hand up to get a hand up. And we absolutely understand people have behavioral health problems, and we absolutely understand we have people that have drug addiction problems, and we absolutely understand women that are, escaping domestic violence. And so we're thrilled to help these populations. I think what we need to clear here, and again, that's not what this hearing is necessarily about. And I'm thrilled for anybody who has received good help and it's made a difference in their life. Completely not what this is about. What this is about is when we write a law, we appropriate it, the law is followed exactly as we wrote it. Now, again, we could have written the law to say hey, we're going to create Senate Bill 1720 for homelessness services, and we want you to include the zone or Title 42. We did not. Okay, so I want to make that very clear to everybody. And again, Phoenix has the zone, okay? Mesa has unique populations of its own that it needs to take care of. And we'd like to see each city doing that without the transferring of people from the zone into another city authorized by the Department of Housing. Make sense? Great.
All right. The time for the Department of Housing has come to an end, but thank you very much. I appreciate you coming forward. It would be helpful, and our staff will be in touch with yours on getting additional documents regarding the dollars that are being expended, encumbered, as well as, it'd be helpful to get a time frame of when you are planning to spend down these dollars. And then the other thing that we didn't get to in this hearing that I really want to at some point is the performance measures. So getting a set of performance measures that are a part of each contract, including the cadence of monitoring. Will the department conduct on-site visits of the various grantees to determine whether they're meeting the goals and really encapsulating what success looks like?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, happy to continue to have that conversation and happy to talk offline as well or come back.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. All right. Our next presenter is the City of Mesa.
Just that to advance. Oh, enter. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Meg Layal. I'm with the City of Mesa. I'm here to present on Community Court on behalf of our presiding magistrate, John Tatz, who is out sick. So very happy to be telling you about our Community Court in Mesa. We started it in July of 2018, and I'm very bad at remembering my own slides, so please bear with me. We started it in July of 2018, primarily to deal with the homeless population who find themselves in the judicial process or system. We serve chronic offenders who commit lower level crimes. We provide a coordinated response of services needed by the participant. This is housing, employment, being able to get your ID, Social Security card, and substance abuse treatment. If you successfully complete those tasks, we provide a mitigation of the sanctions, and it is collaborative. We work with law enforcement, it's prosecutors, public defenders, judges, community agencies. We have faith-based groups involved. Everybody comes together to work with the individual to get them what they need. Our goals in creating this court, our macro goal was to reduce recidivism. These people tend to be high utilizers of the criminal justice system, and so our goal was to try and find a way to have them stop being high utilizers, and they're mostly high utilizers based on their status of being homeless. And then our micro goal was to improve the lives of individuals that we came across with who are citizens of our city. Why does it work? Community court works for reasons that may not seem obvious to people outside of the court system. It offers an immediate alternative to an individual's current lifestyle and an immediate alternative to them going to jail. The navigators that we work with are able to assist in tasks that were previously insurmountable to our community court clients. This includes getting an ID, getting a Social Security card, having a place to have it mailed, getting it on access, being able to get a phone so that you can access your health care. The navigators that we utilize are what we call peer support. They're particularly effective with this population because most of them have come from this population in the past, and they have found the path out for themselves, so they're very equipped at helping others find their path out. The court, the judges, the lawyers, we offer a place where people can achieve some success and find a way to feel good about themselves based on what they're doing. They receive a lot of positive reinforcement in a place where they normally only have had negative interactions. We use a harm reduction model and deal mostly with our chronic offenders. If you successfully complete community court, you are able to get your charges in the city of Mesa dismissed, as well as many old fines or fees that are owed to the city. I do want to make you aware not every crime is eligible for community court. We don't take violent crimes. We don't take DUIs. We don't take crimes where there's a victim. Generally speaking, there's rare exceptions. If a victim is a family member and wants an individual to get help, usually those are our mental health folks. We treat people with dignity, courtesy, empathy, and respect, and those things are hugely powerful in terms of changing the way people think about themselves, changing their brains, and impacting their ability to succeed. I did mention that we base acceptance into the program is mainly based on homelessness or risk of homelessness. If you've been in our program before and haven't succeeded, we do allow you to come back. It doesn't happen very often. We don't have a high recidivism rate, but we do understand that there are circumstances sometimes that impede somebody's success this go around, but they will for sure get it on the next go around. And the program is voluntary, so we don't require people to go into it. We ask them if they want to be into it so that they have immediate buy-in. Almost everybody says yes, but we do make them aware it's their choice to make this decision, which is empowering to them because they're not usually in a situation where they get to make a lot of decisions. The way cases get into our court, basically a police officer can cite you in the city of Mesa directly into community court. If you are cited with any other crime and a judge, if you are cited into one of our regular arraignment or in our custody courts and the judge or the prosecutor or the public defender become aware that you are homeless, they can make a motion to transfer you into the community court. We generally take everybody, like I said, with the exception of some of those crimes. After a period of time, and community court does take some time, we tell the offenders, we tell the participants, it takes as long or as short as you want it to be. It's all dependent on them and how quickly they can get their tasks done. They come back to court every 30 to 45 days and check in and let us know what they've been able to achieve. When they get to the point where they have become stable in their housing, they have all the documents they need, they are employed and have held that job for a period of time, and they've undergone substance abuse treatment if needed, mental health treatment if needed, or even medical treatment if needed, we get to a position where, based on the recommendation of the team, an individual can graduate from community court. When they graduate, we dismiss their current cases, we have a ceremony for them, their fines are dismissed. It's very moving. Lots of people cry, and there's a lot of joy in the room when that happens. And all of us that have worked in community court say that we have had the privilege of witnessing miracles on a daily basis when our clients achieve that success. So the results of community court, aside from what I just shared with you with regard to graduations, we do have much lower recidivism and law and order in the city of Mesa. We have had drastic savings in our public defender and jail costs based on people going to this program and then succeeding. These people go from being a drain on resources to contributing members of society, and we do have community court graduates who have come back to us just to check in and let us know how they're doing. We have community court graduates that are now working in this system to try and help those like them. And it's altruistic. You improve the lives of people on a daily basis, and it's not often that many of us get to say that we can do that. Our results, this I need my glasses for because the numbers are small. The first year we graduated 119 people from the program. Of those people, and this is very significant, this was our first year, those 119 people had accounted for 1,536 arrests in the past 10 years in Mesa and 6,792 police contacts. So we were able immediately to get some of our most serious habitual homeless folks off the streets. In 2019, we graduated 131 people. 2020, we only graduated 30 people, obviously, but it's important to note that even during the height of the pandemic, we did community court. We did it online. We did it with cell phones and Zoom chat rooms and videos, and we were able to still assist people. We met twice a week and worked with them all through even the darkest shutdown days of the pandemic. In 2022, we graduated 123 people, and of those 123 people, only 10 have returned. In 2023, we graduated 126 people, and only 7 have returned. So our recidivism rates in the criminal justice world, these rates are practically negligible. And even then, we've improved our numbers from 2022 to 2023. One other notable fact about community court is, in addition to the decrease in police calls and fire calls, is that our clients, despite being homeless, come to court. We have a better show-up rate in community court than they do in any of the other criminal justice courts in the city of Mesa. So it's clear that there's a need and that they're inspired to do this and that it works. We've been doing it now for 5.5 years. I was involved in talking to the city of Phoenix about their community court, and I believe they literally just started their first docket this week. So they have a much greater need than we do, being a bigger city. But I'm looking forward to them having the same success that we do. And with that, it would be my pleasure to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. And let me just.
I'm sorry, could I just ask, what the city that's doing this now that you're helping them get started is Phoenix?
Phoenix.
Okay.
Phoenix just started their court this week.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Judge Leal?
I'm not a judge.
Okay. Ms. Leal?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Leal, on one of your slides, you mentioned that community court offers an immediate alternative. What is the alternative?
Well, typically speaking, people who are charged with crimes are facing jail time. So the immediate alternative that we offer them is, instead of going to jail, we offer them the opportunity to start to change their life right then and there.
What does that entail?
It depends on the individual. As the director of service said, Severus, sorry. Okay. You've met one homeless person, you've met one homeless person. They all have different needs based on where they are, but we always make sure they have all their documents, ID, social security card, birth certificate, where are they staying? Is there an opportunity for them to get into a shelter so they can immediately get off the streets? Are they working? A surprising number of people that are in community court are working. So can they continue to work if they need health care? It just depends on the individual and what they need. And then we offer those services to them. It takes time, obviously, to get a few things done. You can't get your ID the same day you apply for it. But we start that very day. Whereas if without community court, individuals getting it on their own, it takes a lot longer. They can't get down to where it is. They don't have money for an ID, things of that nature.
What kinds of crimes do individuals commit that they find themselves in front of the community court?
Typically speaking, I would say 99% of them are trespass or possession of drug paraphernalia, or both.
Okay, trespass in what way?
Being in a park after it's closed, sleeping on a bus park bench, being on the light rail. That's a different violation. Being in private property when the business is closed, things like that, or if a business has posted signs, no trespassing, and an individual is there behind the building or whatever at any time of the day or night, they can be arrested for trespass.
You mentioned drugs. So a lot of these citations are linked up with trespassing and drugs? You said 99% were trespassing and drugs.
Yeah,
both.
Most people that come into community court have more than one citation, and that's typically both trespass and or drug paraphernalia, usually both.
Okay. And the alternative that you provide, again, just to make sure I understand it, if they are homeless, you would find them shelter. Is one of the alternatives that they have to be participating in drug treatment?
Always.
Okay. What does that look like?
So, again, sometimes we have to complete some steps before they can do that. For example, if you're not currently enrolled in Access or if you don't have an ID. So we, a lot of times, have to do that first before we can enroll them in treatment. any person in the state of Arizona who is charged with a drug offense is required by statute to do treatment. So all of those people have been required to do treatment in community court since the very beginning.
And the shelters are the shelters that you place them in. Are they complying with the treatment requirements?
No, not necessarily. It depends on the shelter. There are sober living homes that are quasi-shelters that do treatment.
What about the city of Mesa, the Windermere or the New Grand? Will those require treatment?
Will the shelter require treatment, or will community court require treatment?
So community court says this individual who wants to participate instead of going to jail will place you at the Windermere, for instance, and as a condition of being at the Windermere, you have to get treatment for addiction, and treatment, is it provided on site?
I don't know if it's provided on site, but it is required.
Okay. You mentioned harm reduction. What does that mean to you?
Harm reduction is, to me, it means offering them all the services we possibly can, including housing if we have it, before somebody might be sober. Although typically speaking, as a practical matter, it's generally concurrent.
Okay. So if someone is arrested and they are eligible for community court and they are arrested and they're high at the time, how do they even stand trial if they're not, A, they're not sober, but B, they're intoxicated?
Well, if they're arrested and they're put in jail, they're going to be in jail for a couple of days, and so they probably will be sober by the time they get out.
Okay.
If they are cited and released, they can come to court sober, and I would say most of our clients do. Occasionally they don't, but that's always an indication that they need treatment, regardless of whether or not they're there on a drug charge, and so we would mandate it to participate in the court.
Okay. You mentioned the graduation rates, and it's hard for me to understand. I understand you've graduated 119 in your first year, 131 in your second year, 38, 113, 123. How many were actually referred to community court that didn't graduate? Like, of the total number, what's the...
I do not have that number for you.
Okay.
I would say that a lot of people are referred to community court that don't ever even come to court. Like they never show up, so they're immediately removed, and they go through the regular criminal justice procedure.
Does that figure into the 50% rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Of those that show and participate, it's a pretty high number, but that graduate eventually. It takes time, but given how homelessness, as we know, has been exploding across the valley, our numbers have gone up significantly since we have started. And we've increased our capacity in that court to handle as many people as we can, but there is still, in any criminal court, I think the average I have heard is that it's like a 30% show up rate in a misdemeanor court, and we're at 50, so we have better than that, but there's not a high show up rate on a lot of misdemeanor courts.
And the last question, have you considered requiring, I understand that you require drug treatment and participation in that as a requirement to stay within the community court, but have you considered requiring participants to take Suboxone or Sublocade as a requirement to stay in community court?
We have not considered that because we do not have the ability to do that.
Why is that?
Because community court is pre-adjudication, so that means that we address all their needs before they're found guilty and sentenced, unlike, for example, years ago I was the attorney in the Maricopa County Drug Court. That is a post-adjudication court. you've been sentenced and your sentence includes going to drug court. So those courts have the ability to impose more on the individuals. This is voluntary.
But I mean, someone's saying you can either participate in community court or we can go to regular criminal court. And if I'm going to go to community court, I have to participate in drug treatment programs. Correct. What's stopping you from saying you have to take Suboxone or Sublocade?
Oh, we absolutely offer it to all of them. Absolutely.
But it's not required to take it?
It's not required.
Why not?
Because we, as I just explained to you, we don't have the power to require it.
But you do require participating in drug treatment programs.
Correct.
What's the difference between a drug treatment program and taking Sublocade or Suboxone?
Mr. Chairman, I believe a lot of people in the treatment world have differing views on Suboxone, and I haven't even heard of the other one you're talking about.
Sublocade's 1 month. You just come in once a month to get your shot, and then the cravings, manages cravings for drug and alcohol.
Personally, as somebody that speaks to these individuals, I would recommend it if it works for them, if it helps them to stay sober. But I would also have to tell you, based on my years of working with people that are addicts, everybody's sobriety is different, and how they get there it's their journey. Not everybody has to reach their moment where they decide to be sober. So I don't know that would. I hear what you're asking and what you're thinking would achieve, and I'm not sure that it would. And I think there are people that might have issues with being forced to take any kind of medication.
But community court's voluntary, so you'd be voluntarily agreeing to take it versus going to criminal court. But I think we've hit that home much. I'm concerned that the community courts don't have as much of a consequence scheme that you would need for real success when it comes to transforming the lives and providing healing to individuals who are addicted or who do have mental illness. So that's what I was trying to get at here, is that I'm not convinced that this is heading in the right direction, but I'm not sure you have enough teeth in it in order to make this a larger success than it could be.
Okay, so if they don't come to court at all in the city of Mesa, those individuals, then all of those crimes require jail time. And usually those people are not first offenders, so they're getting jail on all of their cases. If they've come to community court and have refused to take advantage of the services or tried to game us or play along, when they wash out, and they will, they do get an enhanced jail sentence. They are made aware of that while they're in community court. I didn't want to get too much into the weeds and the mechanism of the everydayness of the court, but if an individual is in our court, says they're participating, but they're really not participating, they meet with the city prosecutor tells them the enhanced sentence that they are looking at, what they can expect will happen to them if they don't do something and they're kicked out of community court. So they are made aware, and they do face an enhanced sentence, and that has happened since the very beginning of community court. So it's pretty significant, and they're made aware of it.
Thank you. Representative Schwiebert.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for this program. It sounds like you're having extraordinary results, that you're leveraging the power that you have to help really transform lives and make a difference, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to follow up a little bit on Mr. Gress's line of questioning about requiring, and I don't remember the names of the specific drugs that you talked about, the two drugs. I'm trying to, what it makes me think of is like when the government tries to encourage people to take COVID vaccines, we hear an uproar about nobody can tell me what I have to do with my body. You can't force me to take a vaccine. I think that they're dangerous. And yet, what I'm hearing is, why aren't we forcing people in this program who are signing up voluntarily to also have to take a drug? Does that sound like am I onto something there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Schwiebert, yes, I would agree with that. I think that particularly in this day and age, there's a lot of pushback about people being forced to take any kind of medication at any time. To the chairman's point, it's voluntary. Certainly that's part of it, but I think that it's also, at the end of the day, our goal is to have people participate, because if they participate and succeed, they will not be re-offending, and so they will no longer be our issue or our problem. To the point of requiring people to take medication, we do see some of that in the world on the Title 36 mental health, where people get so sick they're required to take medication. And I think it has mediocre results. It doesn't always, requiring somebody to take medication doesn't work as well as making them want to take it. And what we try to do in community court is make them basically want to do this for themselves, so that we don't have to police them for the rest of our lives, make sure they're taking that pill, they've figured out how to get there on their own. That seems to be a better long-term solution with these people that are experiencing this. But again, it's offered, I would say many of the people that are in community court are utilizing that service. It is making a difference in their lives, and that's wonderful.
So what could we do as a legislature to boost your capacity to help more people with this community court model? How can we help?
Did you talk to my mom before this hearing? I am very passionate about this court. I was one of the founders of it. I have worked in it every week for the last 5.5 years. It's some of the best legal work I've ever done in my life, and it's not even really that much legal work. I think the state is headed in the right direction, in the sense that other cities have approached us. In Mesa, Phoenix is taking it on. It is something that the court system can do that makes a big difference. It's sort of, it's our piece of solving the homelessness crisis and puzzle. So any support that's offered to other cities, other jurisdictions in terms of starting these kinds of therapeutic courts, I think would be welcomed. They work surprisingly better than most people. It works better than any of us ever thought it would. We just thought when we started in at Mesa, they asked us what we could do in the courts, and city prosecutor and I said, what about this? And so here you go, 5.5 years later, it's working, and it's always worked. So anything to support these kinds of courts, I think would be welcomed.
Thank you. And finally, I lost my train of thought. It was a really important point that I was going to make, but maybe I'll get it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll do a final round at the end.
Okay.
Representative Parker.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I have a background in psychology and nursing degrees, and so I'd love to hear you elaborate on how you make people want. Because we've never been able to motivate people and give them a drug for that, or, create that. How have you done that?
I would say, and this is what I've seen in terms of, I also have a degree in psychology as well as a law degree. What I have seen is that we try to inspire change in these individuals with positive affirmation. So the best example I can give as a mother is, you have a kid, and if you're constantly yelling at them, it doesn't always improve the behavior, right? But if you can find a way to praise them into positive activities and redirect them into positive activities, it can improve behavior. Well, human beings don't change that much from when they're young to when they're old. And so by offering a lot of positive affirmation from people, I don't consider myself a person of stature, but when we're in a courthouse and there's attorneys and a judge and you are charged with a crime and people are not mad at you or wanting to punish you, but saying, how can we help you and what can we do to make this better? And I tell all the people I talk to, it's very nice to meet you and thank you very much for coming in. And please make sure you come back in 30 days. And shockingly, it works better than you think it would. So I would say that that's probably the part that surprised most of us, is that if we just took a little extra time with each of these individuals, they would succeed.
Great. And a follow-up question on a different subject. Could you answer this question? Are you going to require drug testing for people who are going to be placed at the Grand?
That is out of my jurisdiction.
That's what I wondered. And you understand that I represent the citizens of that area. And again, the city of Mesa, they were told one thing. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect between people in your courts and those who were told to be at the Grand.
But I do want to make a point, and the question is, does the community court require verified sobriety? To participate in it, you have to have regular drug testing?
We do not have
In
the
general?
capacity to require drug testing. We do require verified completion of treatment. So if you've gone to a treatment facility and they will give you a certificate, we have to see it. It has to be seen and verified. There are clients that are in community court that are also on probation in the county, so they are drug testing through that. But we don't have the capacity to drug test them at the city. But we do require verification that they have completed treatment.
Your time wasn't charged, so I apologize.
No problem. Jump right in, Chairman. Just to clarify his point, you don't require proof of sobriety.
Well, I don't know how you would prove sobriety unless you follow somebody around all the time. We do require that they have successfully completed a treatment program and bring us documentation from that treatment program.
How long is that?
It depends on the treatment program that they go to. So when they do intensive outpatient treatment, they're screened at the beginning and they're given a period of time to where they think that's how long the experts that deal in addiction think they need. If they go to residential treatment, it's 30, 60, 90 days, depending on their progress. And then a lot of times they go to sober living home after that. So we require that they have completed a program.
All right. Were there other questions related to the community court or? Okay. I did want to ask some questions about the funds that the state awarded to the city of Mesa for the homelessness services and support funds. Is that possible?
Not for me.
Before she leaves from the community court, did you have any other question for her?
I just thought of my point, and that was just an appreciation that you are in the trenches, you are dealing with people every day, and I think that it's important that we learn from your experience and that we trust the experts on what works. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon. I'm Detective Aaron Rain, and I'll be speaking more to the DOH funding aspect of things. It might be weird that I'm here as a police officer in this aspect, but since January of 2018 through January of 2024, I was assigned to the city manager and mayor's office, particularly as the police liaison to the city manager, and my project assigned was homelessness and anything related to homelessness. So I'm very deep involved in standing up the community court with my colleague, Ms. Leal, and the court staff, and also the Off the Streets project that more specifically where the DOH funding was spent. So that being said, I want to give a little background on the Off the Streets program. Initially, we started out in May of 2020 with a need to try and get the most vulnerable persons off the street and get them housed and get them into a situation where they can improve their stability. This was during COVID, and so we were trying to get the most COVID susceptible persons off the street. And there was a bit of an epiphany. Traditionally, when we would seek people out and try and get them to get into shelter, there was an organic resistance. We as humans have an organic resistance to change. I like to joke, particularly in the police world, that cops hate two things: change and stuff staying the same. We complain about both, right? So, when it comes to folks and changing their situation, it's not always easy to look at confronting their background, their mental illness, their homelessness, and the wreckage of their past. So when we were able to get them stabilized, feeling human, because Maslow's hierarchy of needs has not changed. We still need to get people's basic humanistic needs met before we can start to get them to progress towards self-actualization. So the program started out with first responders. police officers particularly, finding persons that were experiencing homelessness and connecting them to services. And it starts out kind of a triage process because as said before, there is no one size fits all. And I can tell you my nearly 2 decades as a police officer and nearly a decade in the Arizona National Guard and the U.S. Navy before that, we as governments are really good at one size fits all solutions to problems, and it doesn't always work that well. So we looked at community court particularly, and then with this Off the Streets program is a person-centric model. What does this person in front of us need, right? So if I have a homeless 73-year-old woman who's never been homeless before, worked her whole life and just barely entered homelessness, does she need to go to drug treatment to qualify for the shelter? Absolutely not. Do I have someone that is addicted to opiates? Do they need to go to treatment? It would absolutely help if we get them to treatment. Some might need to go to an emergency room to get their medical needs cared for before they progress into the shelter program. So that's the first phase of Off the Streets, where there's this triage. The officer finds a person in need. And back in the day, we would kick together a bunch of funds, get a hotel room, but the person would still wake up homeless. All we were doing was moving the homelessness indoors, right? Because there was no services wrapped around that. So we looked at some of the models that had been used previously. Back in 2009, I think McKinney-Vento used hotels to house families through the school systems. But what we saw was a lack of wraparound services and security on site. So that's why, from the beginning, we have a round-the-clock police officer at the Off the Streets program. Initially, we started out.
This is the Windermere.
The Windermere, that's correct.
Okay, and you're going to do the same with the Grand.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And so we started out with hourly room checks during business hours. From 7 in the morning till 9 p.m., we were doing hourly room checks at the Windermere initially.
What about drug dogs?
I did bring a drug dog on occasion.
Okay.
But so with that, we've based on the what we found was we've scaled it back to 1 to 2 times a day that we're actually doing room checks. We just weren't. It seemed like wasted effort when we were doing it every hour. So we made that adjustment on that. And then what we consider a positive exit is someone who is moving on to a further into their path to exit homelessness. It could be a different program. It could be returning to family after we've confirmed with the family. It could be their own housing. It could be self-pay. We've had many, many people that were working a full-time job but just couldn't get enough to get a first and last together and get a deposit. And so we were that buffer that helped them for a few months to get them stabilized.
Do you track people after they leave your program?
Yeah,
are you familiar
with HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System?
Yeah.
So that tracks people where they enter homelessness and every time they seek services. One thing we found was...
Well, what about exiting homelessness?
Absolutely. It's all captured, yes.
And you're tracking after they leave the MESA program, and what's the success rate after that?
So currently, I don't have the newest numbers, but we were about 74% positive exits, which is really high.
What does that mean?
That means they left our programming to go into additional programming or their own sustainable housing.
And then from that period, you tracked them on how long that was sustained?
That's correct.
How long was that period? What's the goal?
The goal is for them to not re-enter homelessness.
I know, but you've tracked them, 74% success rate, they leave City of Mesa services, and they find some alternative. Do you check in with them on a regular basis for a period of a year to see if they've recidivated?
Yeah, the recidivism is measured based off their unique HMIS identifier. That each person has a unique number, and so we track that. Yes.
Okay, and if you would be able to provide data on that to the committee,
yeah, absolutely.
On
we have
the unique identifier, what share?
I'm a cop. I took this job because I didn't want to do math, but we have data specialists who track all that, and our data guru can provide whatever data you're looking for.
Okay.
One of the things on data that we found was 60% of the people that entered homelessness from a Mesa address were seeking services in other cities. So as it relates to the zone, people who are in the zone that entered homelessness from Mesa, we absolutely wanted to take those people back to Mesa if they wanted to reintegrate into the Mesa communities because they're Mesa community members, and help them reintegrate back into our community. As far as...
Sorry, please go ahead.
So as far as the DOH funding, the way we utilize it is the Off the Streets program, it's basically 3 phases now. We used the funding as a pilot program to create a 3rd phase. First phase is a triage, just like an emergency room, right? If you're not able to see the doctor in 48 hours, do you build a bigger lobby? No. Do you add more services to get people to transfer through? So we figure out what the best path for that unique individual is. Some of them, particularly, what we've seen as our fastest growing population is the elderly, first-time homeless, and families. So their needs are very different than somebody that might have substance issues or behavioral health issues. So we triage in that first 72 hours where they're best placed. And then there's a 90-day program, phase 2, where they're wrapped in services, they have case management, they're given weekly goals. Their ability to earn their next week is based on the goals and them achieving the goals and having the set compliance to all the rules and all the policies that are set forth. And then phase 3 is this new program that we started using the DOH funding for. And that is for people who are on a good trajectory. Because I heard the council member, Representative Parker mentioned in the council meeting that 90 days it's not possible to get everybody out of homelessness, and she's 100% right. So you were able, with the money spent, we were able to create another buffer for the people that are on a good trajectory, that are compliant, that are not having issues with sobriety, that are on the right progress, but their housing path might take a little bit longer. It gives us that buffer to add those additional rooms to get.
And you
those
test
people.
them for sobriety
We
regularly?
don't test them, no, but if there's no indicia, if there's no probable cause to test them, there's really not a need to test them. If they're not getting arrested and they're progressing, then like I tell, like with community court, you know, if they're not getting arrested, that's the goal. That's the goal of the court, is to change their behavior so they're not offending, right? I tell them, I used to joke, you know, be like one of the cops and go home and drink yourself to sleep as long as you perform your job appropriately. And, you know, we're not requiring people to be sober to do anybody's job.
Well, yeah, but we're providing services and letting them avoid facing criminal charges in exchange for maintaining sobriety and
for them not reoffending.
Sure.
To
Well,
not
they would have
reoffend.
otherwise been charged in criminal court. We're giving them an alternative. So, you know, they're already there for a crime that hasn't been adjudicated yet. We're giving them a pathway, and all we're saying is you should be sober and shouldn't be taking drugs, and we're going to verify that. But the fact that you don't do that,
I agree that people should be sober, but not everybody is. Whether it be alcohol or anything else, throughout society, we all have issues. Whether it be sugar, consuming too much.
but these
sugar.
individuals had issues where they found themselves on the streets.
Agreed.
Or behind buildings smoking fentanyl.
So.
Okay, so please
One
go
of the
ahead.
things we do is we leverage the compliance to community court for them to maintain their sobriety, to maintain their treatment and all that. With their community court person, all of that is required for them to maintain their housing at the Windermere. They have to be compliant with all those same rules. And so if they're not being compliant at the court reports to us, and then they have to find an additional resource.
Okay.
With this, we've served since May of 2020 about 2,000 people now. About 300 of those were children. And it's not what you might expect.
You said 2,000?
2,000 people.
And 300 were children.
About 300 were children as part of families. We've seen a significant increase in the amount of families and elderly homeless. Our oldest was 92 years old, a World War II veteran. No previous homelessness. We're seeing people that are aged out of their.
What share of the 2,000 were seniors who
So
were
currently,
aged out?
I think I have 44 people over the age of 62 currently there right now out of 125 people. And that number keeps going up.
And all of them, what share of those individuals couldn't afford their rent, and that's why they're on the streets?
Some of it's medical bills, some of it's a myriad of reasons, but the majority of those folks are first-time homeless. There's not an issue of chronicity or episodic homelessness. This is first-time homeless. So who's getting served there is the most vulnerable persons that are on the street, and that's particularly the elderly and the families. That takes up a bulk of the rooms that we use. As far as the Grand Hotel, and I think there's a little bit of mixing of messages. So the messaging that went out about the Grand Hotel, that is specific to that particular facility. It will only be the populations that are specified. None of the DOH funding is used for that purchase or will be used for that.
What are the funding sources used for the Grand Hotel?
Currently it's ESG and ARPA.
ESG, what is that?
Through Services grant? Yeah, through most of it comes through MAG.
Okay.
So federal monies and then city monies for the police department, because the police department isn't paid through the federal monies.
Okay.
So with that, as far as what I read in the NOFA was there was nothing about Title 42 from Mesa, but there was a mention of people from the zone, and that is specific to us taking previous Mesa citizens and helping rehabilitate them back and integrate them back into Mesa. It wasn't us scooping up everybody else. So what we find is if we get someone in our system from Phoenix or from Chandler, we coordinate with those cities. Hey, we've got this person. We're not going to make them wait outside. We're going to help give them services for a couple hours, couple days maybe, and then when they have room, we transfer them over. If they have a Mesa person, we transfer them over to our systems.
Okay. Anything else before we go into questions?
The one thing I just want to express our gratitude for that funding, the number of lives and persons that were helped in this that phase 3 program. It's been a marked improvement in our ability to extend, particularly people that are on the right path, and so our sincere gratitude for that.
Well, thank you for being here. Representative Schwiebert.
Thank you. Again, thank you for being here and for your really great work in this program. So have you had any complaints from people at the hotel or from the management of the Grand or the Windermere about this program or people participating in the program?
As far as we were there for like 6 or 7 months before anybody knew we were even there. The population, when we measured crimes in the area, the mile radius around the Windermere before the 3 years prior to us being there was above the city average on crimes per 1,000 people. When we measured again, since we've been there, it's been below the city average. That's because there's a police officer there. Some people complain about seeing a police car parked there. It offends their sensibilities to see a police car there. And there have been some complaints from a myriad of reasons, but very minor stuff. The hotel, no complaints from the hotel. We've worked with the owner there for years, and everything's been smoother than you'd expect with the population that's in crisis and exiting crisis and then transitioning back into amongst the rest of us.
Okay. And is this a voluntary program on the part of private business? They're willing to do this? Do you have other hotels who are interested in doing this? And what is your criteria for determining whether or not you would want to use those rooms?
So, yeah, it is voluntary. We have a contract, but we've been approached by several other hotels. Some of it is we want to make sure that the services we're providing are distributed throughout our city. A lot of the services provided have been traditionally in the west side of the city, and so we're trying to get more service provision throughout the community so that the west side of the community doesn't feel as burdened by the service providers.
Okay. So thank you for this. I think those are my only questions for right now. I appreciate basically what I heard you say was that we shouldn't be criminalizing homelessness. We should be making sure that we're providing the services that are needed to get people off the streets and back to a life where they're contributing. And it sounds like it's a very successful program based on the numbers you've shared.
Absolutely. And one of the things that to dovetail into that is with Martin v. Boise, it gives our department the ability to cite for urban camping now and then refer them into community court. And community court has been the best tool we found for the service-resistant homeless population to finally engage in services. Because that's the goal, to get them to engage in services and stop offending, and then transition their life into a better place. And if we can get that to happen and utilize the tools that we organically have and optimize those resources, everybody's better off.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Parker.
Yes, thank you very much. A couple of things. First of all, I want to clarify something. Mesa does not have drug dogs. You have to contract and bring them in from another agency. Is that not correct?
No, we have 8 K-9 dogs in the police department.
Okay. Also, you did bring up the Windermere as being great. And I know we probably have, people here that were at the City of Mesa hearing and people that hear that we're in the Windermere and whatnot and think that's great. And for however many people here, there are hundreds of Yelp ratings, and I'm only going to quote a couple. Screaming residents all hours of the day. It's like the Bates Hotel.
is a paradise compared to the Windermere. They have to register to go to the Windermere through bulletproof glass. They misrepresented that it was a homeless hotel. So some people actually checked into the Windermere as just travelers and whatnot and were not told. They said the sewer smell is intolerable, it's run down, amenities are closed because of the trashing of the pool and various things. They said just getting to our room, we see drug deals going down. So again, I appreciate your testimony about the Windermere, but you have hundreds of documented testimonies from others that completely disagree.
Yeah, to be fair, it was a high crime area before we were there. There's a homicide in one of the rooms that we utilize now. The year before we were there, nearly every single overdose that's happened at that hotel since we've been there has been in the paying customer rooms, not in the program rooms. Because they're not getting, those rooms aren't being checked on. It's paying customers that visit the hotel and use the rooms.
Sir, I represent communities around there, and again, I'm meeting with them constantly. Leisure World, Las Palmas, et cetera, all of the ones that will be around the Grand and as well as the Windermere. They tell a very different story, and it has been horrific. And that's from my citizens, and I'm just their representative, I'm just their spokesperson, so they say a very different story. But let's move on. I have a couple of questions for you. You nailed it. You said that there are definitely two different populations, and I understand triage is an old ER nurse. There's two different populations. Population of the elderly, the families, the abused mother, displaced, most vulnerable, experiencing first-time homelessness. But there's the different population. And again, the courts have mentioned the other population, the offenders, some with crimes, some with drug addicted, some with behavioral health. Two entirely different populations. Would you agree? And they have to be triaged. I mean, that's what you said.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
The question is, would you agree that we're talking about different populations?
There's a myriad of differences in the population. Every single person is different, and that's why we have to look at things as an individual.
Okay, great. And do you understand what happened? And again, I have all the affidavits. I have the citizens. I was at a couple of the hearings, and I have all the paperwork you handed out to them. Do you understand why the citizens in the area are very, very, very upset? Because what they were told and what is being done is completely opposite. For example, and over again in the documents of Off the Street program you handed out to them within your contract as well, you stated, and I will quote, that it was, meaning the grant, was only going to be for the seniors, the disabled veterans, the women with children of domestic violence, and single women.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked that question over and over again.
Yes.
And every citizen there, and I've talked to my residents and my citizens, and they said they would love to see those people have a home and be helped, without a doubt.
Perfect.
Great, but that is not the case.
Well, that's not that case because we don't do the grand yet. That's the future plans for that facility.
Aha.
Currently, we have the Windermere, and if we just only serve that population, we would be losing a large portion of it. That's why there's going to be two facilities.
Okay, however.
So what you're talking about is something that doesn't exist yet, and that's the plan, is to meet very specifically meet what is required there. So we meet the good neighbor policy, and we don't violate that. So I'm not sure what the question is if we don't even do that yet, how that's convoluted into what we're doing currently at the Windermere.
With all due respect, that's not entirely accurate, sir, and let me explain. Okay. If the grant was going to be just for that population of the elderly and the abused mother with children, if that's what it was, you would need zero need to contract with CBI. You would not need a lockdown facility. You would not need drug treatment. You would not need police. You would not need an 8-foot fence, because I think it's offensive to state that the sweet abused mother who is getting away from an abusive husband is drug addicted and a criminal and needs a lockdown and needs to have security.
Well, I think that's a bit reductive of an analysis of what's actually going on. So many of the CBI staff that we use are formerly homeless. They have the lived experience. They have the ability to connect and build rapport at a level that you and I are going to have a challenge getting that level of rapport. So they're like a human GPS that helps them guide through the labyrinth of of bureaucracy getting out of homelessness.
Let
So
me-
a
let me-
single mother is going to need the same thing, all of that. They're going to need that kind of service, because if you just move them inside, all you're doing is moving the homelessness indoors.
A single mother with children, sir, with all due respect, is going to need a kitchen and laundries, and you're
Agreed.
never going to provide them with a
Agreed.
kitchen and laundry at the Grand, are you? None. You're going to have to bring in takeout laundry. You're going to have to bring in meals. And let me specify that on the website from CBI, they are only to deal with, that is their organization, CBI, alcohol, drug abuse, treatment, mental health crisis intervention per IRS Form 990. That is who CBI is. Whereas the sweet little mother getting away from her abusive husband, which we want to help her if she's homeless for
One
that.
minute.
We're homeless. We want to help her, and we want to help the vet who just got priced out of his home. They don't need a lockdown. They don't need CBI. They need a home. They don't need to be shuffled for 90 days.
They'll still
You've
need
got
the
two different
services that, that CBI provides on helping to get IDs, helping to get their documents so that they can get the housing that they need. I can tell you that when my family was homeless, my single mother had all of us children who were homeless, I would have loved to have this kind of opportunity rather than living on the streets like we did.
But you didn't need a contract with CBI. And let me go a step further.
I think the time
Okay.
we'll do a follow-up round.
Great.
One more follow-up round. I do agree with you that homelessness does range the gamut in terms of its severity. But the services provided, for instance, at the Windermere, that's fixed. That is a fixed intervention that you have.
No, they're tailored to each specific person.
So each room and each support at the Windermere is reflective of the unique needs.
Absolutely. And then we staff on each room as a city. We staff on everybody there to find out what their progress is and what their services needed are.
How many of the people currently in a room at the Windermere have addiction issues? What percentage? Because the community court said 99% are in community court for drug issues. So what share have addiction issues going in?
I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but my best estimate would be less than 30%.
Less than 30%. Okay, I would really love to see that information because that does not comport with what we've heard, especially,
But you got to understand who our population, who's actually at the Windermere. I spend 40 hours a week for the last 3 years there. Actually, more like 60 hours a week some weeks. It's not who you traditionally picture.
Well, but
it's the elderly person.
But can I ask you this though?
Certainly.
Isn't the lobby locked down?
It has been since COVID.
It's locked, but COVID's over. Why would it still be locked? Why would the lobby be locked down? And why would there be a bulletproof glass between the reception area?
That's been there since before we were there. The bulletproof glass. The lobby now works as the office for the case managers.
But the lobby's locked down. What I don't get, and then Windermere isn't even on the website anymore. But people can book at the Windermere, paying customers via
correct.
Booking.com or Expedia.
There's a few rooms in the back that are still available.
And the condition of those rooms, according to Yelp reviews of people who aren't even from here.
It's a private business, sir. I can't.
But I suspect that
change their property.
Are the other rooms in a better shape than the ones that people book? It's hard for me to believe that they are. So I think that there are things that aren't adding up with the way that you're administering your program.
You're welcome to come take a tour.
I would love to, and I will take you up on that.
I would love that.
Representative.
I'd love that. Thank
Can
you.
I add to that point?
But-
Because it did have something to do with your point.
Okay, briefly.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate that. Representative Schwiebert, it was just a follow-up to his. Thank you very much for that. The boots on the ground that met with the citizens of Mesa, police officers, boots on the ground in community meetings stated that they had 4 men to a room at the Windermere. If that happens at the Grand Hotel, they will have 70 rooms, 4 to a room, 280 people churned every 90 days with no guarantees and no questions asked.
So
That is a direct statement from the meeting that you met with.
Which you're mixing up though. That's phase 1. So phase 1 is that first 72 hours where we're doing the triage. We have a couple bunk rooms that are utilized.
So you could have 4 men who are in crisis in one room
If
together
they're in
during
crisis,
triage?
They're not going to be in the room. They're going to end up in an ED or in a crisis center through CBI if they're in active crisis.
Okay.
So that's the triage period where This was when one of the rooms was, the common room we were using, like an 18 bunk room, was out of service. We had to have a room to get people off the streets. And so there was a bunk room with a case manager in the room. And so there's oversight on what's going on in the room. And so they're there for up to 72 hours to determine, hey, maybe East Valley Men's Shelter is a better place for this person. Maybe the emergency room, maybe whatever. So rather than putting them in a room by themselves, we have to try and isolate them and figure out what's going on and if they can be compliant to the rules, and then they can continue to progress in our system.
Okay. Representative Schwiebert.
Okay, then follow.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that there is a triage process when there are multiple people in a room, and that's why they are there in a setting where there are a lot of other people who are homeless.
It's more congregate, yes, that's 100% correct.
Okay, and I would like to take you up on that tour. I think it's really important that we educate ourselves about what's really happening there, and I also get that this hotel has a history before you all came along, and that maybe we're not taking that into consideration. I don't know. It is a private business, as you said, and if they're getting all these horrible Yelp reviews, I would imagine that they aren't going to have a lot of other.
That is part of one of the other reasons that we were looking to do the Grand Hotels. We will be able to maintain the grounds as we want to, as any other city building.
Mm-hmm.
I currently can't go take care of a private property's grounds as the city. It's his right to have it the way he wants to, as long as he's within code compliance. And so,
Well, the problem is you're writing a big check to that private operator. So
Agreed.
that is a problem, that you're allowing, that the city is allowing these horrible conditions to continue for people who are very vulnerable. So I understand
conditions in the room are very different, and like I
than
said,
the paying customer rooms.
Well, I mean, everybody's got a different standard on a paying customer. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
The normal renters there in that area.
Thank you, and we'll definitely take you up. I want to see these facilities. Representative Parker.
Thank you very much. And I don't
Last
need
question.
a tour. That's my backyard, and I was born and raised. It's right behind Superstition Springs Mall. I drive around it all the time. I've seen the Grand, and I've seen CBI's headquarters in Tempe. So I am well versed in all of these facilities, so I don't need the tour. That's why we have a problem. And one thing I wanted to state was, let's talk about the Grand. Windermere, okay, we've covered that. Let's talk about the Grand. Since you presented it to the citizens of Mesa, my legislative district, that this was going to be for that population, elderly, family abuse, they aren't drug addicted, they aren't crime, they aren't this. You have 70 homes or 70 rooms in there, and you want to help homelessness. Why don't you just give them the room and let them have a home?
Are they?
And give them the home. You want to give them a home, give them the room. Then they're there in a home. They live in a home, and they're off the streets, and they're no homeless anymore. And they don't need any of this CBI involvement. Why don't you just do that?
I wasn't aware that any state funds were used for the Grand. In fact, I'm
Okay, well, let me
confident
clarify on that, because
there's not.
I know Brady brought that up. Let me just clarify for the record for everybody, okay? Whether it's federal dollars, whether it's state dollars, it doesn't matter where it comes from, folks. Those are taxpayers' dollars. Whether they come from the feds, they're taxpayer dollars that went to the feds and came back. If they're state funds, they're taxpayer dollars. So every dollar is taxpayers, and it's sacred.
All right.
Okay, I want to clarify
Any
that.
final response? Okay. Thank you, City of Mesa. And our final thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And we definitely would like to take you up on the tour. Representative Schwiebert, myself, and Representative Parker will be invited.
I could
You've
give the tour.
Okay. Have you stayed there a few times?
No.
Okay.
It's my backyard every day.
Okay. We're now ready for Jared Meyer with the Cicero Institute. And this is going to be some opportunities to give us a perspective on national trends. You're recognized.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak with you again. Again, Jared Meyer with Cicero. I wanted to seize on 3 different remarks that each of you made during your introductory statements to lay out kind of some principles as you're looking at how to best address the homeless problem that Arizona's been struggling with. First is how Representative Gress talked about how we need compassion, but also we need to have high expectations for the people that we're serving to follow the law and take steps to get their lives back on track. The second is from Representative Schwiebert, She mentioned that homelessness is not a one-size-fits-all solution. No one's the same, and it's definitely what got them there is different, and what's going to get them out of homelessness is different. And the third from Representative Parker is that the state has an active and important role on ensuring accountability and transparency for taxpayers. So while discussing homelessness, I think there's two important principles to keep in mind. The first is that homelessness is not only a housing problem. I think a lot of what the witnesses today have talked about and what the committee's brought up in their questions has made this abundantly clear. Yet if you read over and over on homelessness or look at a lot of the policies, especially those pushed by the federal government and historically by Arizona, they have viewed homelessness as simply a housing problem. This approach is known as housing first. It's something that gained popularity when President George W. Bush was in office, and under President Obama it was mandated for almost all federal funds. The idea is that someone was homeless, the way to fix it is give them a house. And then we can kind of wipe our hands, we'll have some services if they want them, but we gave them a house, we fixed the problem. I also call this the California approach because they've been doing it the longest and with the most investment. Unfortunately, Phoenix and Arizona over the past decade has rapidly followed what California was doing. And to show you why this doesn't work, I think it just helps to look at some basic statistics. And again, looking at what the other witnesses have talked about today. Homelessness is especially those people who are living on the streets, those who have been moved out of the zone and are now looking for additional services, is almost entirely driven by mental illness or struggles with drug addiction. Often it's combined together, and giving someone a house simply is not going to fix that problem. So I like that this committee, especially when they're looking at how state funding is going to be used, are looking at the root causes of homelessness, not just what some could view as the easy though expensive fix of giving them a house. There was a recent book that came out by Colburn and Aldern called Homelessness is a Housing Problem. This has gotten a lot of attention in the media, but I actually read the book, and it's very interesting when you look at the data that they cite. Even using their best case scenario, taking median income in an area and looking at median housing prices and then comparing that to homelessness, that only explains 24% of homelessness rates. So I guess, homelessness is a quarter a housing problem, wasn't as catchy with the publisher, but it's something that I think by looking at the title, people are taking this at face value and thinking if we can just give everyone a house, we can solve the problem. The authors also flat out dismiss the effects of mental illness and drug addiction because they look at average rates across urban areas, but what they don't consider is the severity and also the local policies on everything from involuntary commitment to law enforcement activity to crack down on illegal drug use. They also completely dismiss what I call a pull effect, which is when a locality is more permissive to unregulated street camping and open air drug use, that you end up getting more homeless individuals. Same with the more you spend on homelessness, it's almost a direct correlation if your homeless numbers go up. So they completely dismiss that. And last, even weather is a better predictor of homeless rates than housing costs in an area, which does show that the homeless are relatively mobile. I don't have the exact numbers for Phoenix, but in every other city that I've looked into, at least a third of the individuals on the streets directly before they were on the streets in that city came from another state. So just wanted to point that out, and I'm glad that Arizona and the conversation here has really shifted to treatment first, not only housing first. The second thing to keep in mind is that housing first is really housing only. As I mentioned, the federal government's approach, you can't even do mandatory goal setting with participants if you're getting federal HUD funds for homelessness, because that would be putting a barrier to access to housing. When I see Arizona making some needed and critical investments in homelessness, I would love to see them continue to move the state towards doing a different approach than the federal government. While permanent supportive housing could be a great solution for a disabled elderly homeless individual, I don't see that for the same person who's, let's say, in their mid-20s and is struggling with drug addiction. Giving them a house is not going to fix anything. And in fact, looking at data across the last 20 years of permanent supportive housing's expansion, it's very clear in two meta-analyses, one by the Lancet and the other by the National Academy of Sciences, they both came to the same conclusion that permanent supportive housing does nothing to improve the health outcomes for those that it's serving. What's crazy is some of these new studies coming out of cities where they look at treatment groups, those who were left on the streets, and other groups in the study who were given a permanent home, they found that the death rates were actually higher for those who were put in a permanent supportive house. In Denver, within 3 years, 12% of the participants had died in the program. Boston, which was a bit of an outlier, had over half within 5 years ended up dying. And also, to show you why it wouldn't work, 4% of people on the streets in California say that they came there they came there after they lost a job, often, or because of high housing costs, and often they lost that job because of drug use. But only 4% is in that category, whereas 10% came directly from permanent housing units. So the outcomes of putting someone in there, if they even survive, they often leave. So that's why when we're looking at principles of how to reform homelessness, I think funding outcomes, not inputs, is a critical thing to focus on. So hearing all the questions that have been asked today, I think there's unanimous agreement on the committee that outcomes are what matters. And rather than saying, you can't spend money on permanent housing or you have to spend money on X, I think let the outcomes speak for themselves. If it's so evidence-based, as many people claim in committee hearings, it should have higher rates of successful exits to housing, staying out of trouble with the law, surviving, staying with their mental health and drug treatment protocols. So again, performance funding, I think that's really key, especially when Arizona continues to put more money towards homelessness. I mean, California and San Francisco, it's almost unfair to pick on them because it's just so terrible there. Cicero was actually founded in San Francisco before it moved to Austin, so we're intimately familiar with the failures that city's had. They just spent $1.1 billion last year on homelessness, and they have made negative progress on solving the problem. When then Mayor Gavin Newsom first kicked off the push for permanent supportive housing, he actually said within a decade we'll have completely solved homelessness. Well, since then, they built enough units to house every single person who is on the street, yet homelessness has doubled over that time. Phoenix, unfortunately, has the exact same story. Back in 2007, they started pushing towards permanent supportive housing, have built over 6,000 units, yet homelessness has gone up 150%. So we can't simply free house our way out of this problem. And by not looking at results, we continue to pour more and more money into this failed solution. Also, importantly, I think we need to audit the spending. This is something that I have not seen any evidence to show that Phoenix or any other city in Arizona is misusing funds, but there are terrible stories out of New York, San Francisco, and Austin that have found misuse, misappropriation, and theft from homelessness funding. So I think taxpayers deserve the assurance that the dollars that are being spent are not only going to programs that pay off, but also are actually going to the homeless people that they're meant to help. Georgia actually just released an audit today from a bill that they passed last year. It just came out, so I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'd be happy to share with the committee later some of the results of those audits. But the top line was there was no coordinated state strategy, and they were unable to figure out how the different programs work together. The third point is, I think, just moving from housing first to services first. Again, Arizona has shown that they're willing to invest in their homeless community members, but services are really key. And these aren't cheap. A lot of times to take care of someone with a serious mental health issue so that they can stabilize and then get back on their feet, that's going to cost money. But every $700,000 that the state or city spends to build someone a free apartment for life with no required treatment or services is $700,000 fewer dollars that they can spend on someone who needs the help right now while they get into shelter and access those treatments. So kind of a wide-ranging bit of remarks. I have quite a few more data points that I'm happy to share with the committee, but would just love to help answer any questions as you continue to tackle this important issue. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. This is very fascinating to kind of see this treatment first approach. Throughout this whole discussion, I am interested in learning more about the coordinated response. One of the things I saw about Houston is everybody is on the same page and they're all tracking individuals. So, if you have a frequent flyer in Mesa Community Courts, are we going to be able to track that frequent flyer coming to Phoenix? If they've failed multiple times in Mesa and they come to Phoenix, why are we going to give them the benefit of the doubt in Phoenix? They need a different intervention or something with more structure and consequence. What do you make of community court models that you've seen nationally? What works? Because I feel like, it was said that we need positive affirmation. Humans crave positive affirmation. Don't disagree. But when you have someone who's addicted to fentanyl, they're not rational actors. They're not making the normal decisions that you and I would make. So how do you give positive affirmation to someone who is clearly under the influence, in a stranglehold of serious, dangerous substances?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. I think it's important to highlight that according to Phoenix's own numbers, only 14% of those who were living in the zone were living on the streets because there weren't shelter beds available. So
14%.
14%. So to back up your point,
where is that?
It was in City of Phoenix's survey. I can send that to you after.
Okay.
It's in my written remarks as well.
Okay, thank you.
Could you say that one more time? Only 14% of those
who were living in the zone on the streets said that they were there because there were no shelter beds available. So to your point, Mr. Chairman, these people need help, an extra push. So this doesn't apply to just getting them off the streets. It also applies to making them participate in the needed services that will give them a chance to recover. So in community court models, I think they offer a great framework, but it's all on enforcement. It's how, the devil's in the details. There's so many other policy issues, but this is a great chance to be able to, I don't want to use the term get around, but be able to leapfrog the federal prohibition on requirements to be able to access federal housing funding. If someone's under a community court agreement, then they have to comply with that. So it's not the homeless program itself saying that you need to participate in drug treatment or you need to pass a drug test. It's the community court model. So I think this is a great opportunity to be able to unlock some of the federal funds towards more productive uses, which is housing with mandated services.
One more question, and that is, the feds do not permit recipients of their dollars to make participation in treatment mandatory in order to get services, right? And I think the other police officer said that you don't have to be sober to get some of our services, probably because they're funded by the feds. But the feds don't prohibit providers from making their space a drug-free space. Is that right? I mean, doing drugs is illegal, and being able to allow the use of drugs or verifying sobriety, that's not prohibited by federal regulations, are they?
Mr. Chairman, from what I've understood and seen in some isolated cases where I've talked to providers who were getting federal funds, it is very tough to be able to, as a homelessness provider, enforce sobriety or enforce treatment participation. So again, that's why I think with the community courts, they're able to apply this where the homeless provider cannot. So my understanding is in almost all cases, if you're a federal grant recipient, you cannot verify sobriety.
So it sounds like we need to consider in legislation this year that if you're going to receive state housing dollars, then you probably need to have a community court in place.
Mr. Chairman, that's an interesting idea.
Representative Schwiebert.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. So I heard you say that we shouldn't be just offering people free housing, that's not a way to go. And let me just preface this by saying I think we agree on a lot of things here. I think we're all looking for positive outcomes, and I think it's really important to keep that in mind. But I heard you say we shouldn't just be giving people free houses where they can stay. I didn't hear anybody here testify that they want to give people free houses. Did you hear somebody say that?
So, Representative, thank you for the question. Under the federal Housing First model, it prioritizes permanent supportive housing, which by definition is subsidized housing with no end date and no required treatment or services. So when they're following the federal model, which is can be completely separate from the over $100 million that the state is spending, that's what the grants go to in order of priority. And that's why you see so many providers almost have their hands tied, where there are, homelessness, as you brought up, comes from a lot of different entry points, yet we're really looking at from the federal government, which is the giant gorilla in the room. They have much more money than Arizona does when it comes to homelessness. They are looking at only one solution, and that's why so many people are left without services or shelter options. I mean, Phoenix has 25% fewer shelter beds today than it did 15 years ago. That's a major issue when it comes to moving people off the streets and making sure everyone has a safe place to sleep at night.
I would like to get that statistic checked by some of our housing experts who live here in Arizona. Where do you live again?
So right now I live in Washington, D.C., and I've worked on homelessness in the administration before.
Okay. I would really appreciate getting your contact information, too. I don't know if you probably have that, and we can have that so we can, further have a conversation about that. The other thing I want to just mention that I really agree with you about is that services are key. And I was really happy to hear that there are so many people here in Arizona who are looking at that. But I do not want to exclude the needs of veterans, disabled vets, of moms who are escaping abusive situations, of children who have a real need for safe and secure housing. And whatever the percentage is of that, I think it's really vital that we're making sure that we are serving that population and increasing the amount of available and affordable housing here in Arizona. And I think that's a bipartisan agreement. I would hazard to say that people on both sides of the aisle would agree with that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, just so that my comments on the book on homelessness as a housing problem aren't misconstrued, it definitely is a housing problem for a subset of people who may end up finding themselves experiencing homelessness. So again, the elderly individual who maybe with cost of living going up is no longer able to afford their rent, or the single mother who misses a paycheck and isn't able to meet that. That's where housing does play a major issue. But conflating it all together to where the people who were living in the zone, if houses were 5% cheaper, they would still be in the zone. So that was the distinction I wanted to draw. And what I've seen nationally is when people are talking about homelessness, it is consistently about housing, whereas housing plays an important role. And obviously, as it gets more expensive, it gets harder for working class families to afford to live in the neighborhoods maybe they grew up in. I don't think that contributes to what happened with the zone at really any rate.
Well, I think it's all integrated, and it's hard to separate the threads out, but I would not conflate the two necessarily. The last thing I just want to mention is somebody shared an article with me early this morning just about the problem with evictions and homelessness. It's an article in USA Today. It was published just today. Soaring rent prices aren't just hurting wallets, they're shortening lifespans. And so I think that's another point to raise, to say, when people are losing their homes because of evictions, because rents are escalating too high, because our government isn't taking the responsibility that we should take to make sure that we have an economy that works for everybody, that it's not just, gee, that's really terrible that they're homeless. They're actual people people are dying because of that. So I don't want to take our eye off that ball.
Thank you, Representative Schreiber. Representative Parker.
Yes, Jared, Chairman Jared, a couple of things. First of all, just to clarify a couple of things. Again, the statement you made that 14% of the people living in the zone were not there because there was no shelter bed available. That is the statement. Did I say it right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, it's 14% stated that they were there because there were no shelter beds available.
Only 14% said they were there because there was not a shelter bed. Got it. Thank you. I wanted to clarify that. And then you did say that for the population that we were addressing, that the citizens of Mesa were told that the grant was for, which is the displaced vet, the person who missed their paychecks and were priced out of their home because of that, or evicted, that a housing does work for that solution.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, rapid rehousing,
Yeah.
I think can save a lot of money and make a lot of sense when someone was lacking a little bit of funds to be able to stay in their already, the situation they were in before.
And again, I want to make sure I'm hearing it correctly, and I want it on the record correctly a second time, and that is, then those that do struggle in the other population, which of course we're going to work all year on helping as well, and that's paramount in my committees, and that's what I'm here for, is to help all of those that in behavioral health and drug addiction and anybody who needs help. That's what we're going to work in Health and Human Services, and we're going to work that appropriations with Representative Gress, and that's what we're here for. That is a very different animal, and that is where the Housing First does not work. You need to have the treatment first.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would say that's a perfect summation of my remarks. And just one more stat that may be helpful while you're digging into this issue. In San Francisco, 25% of the death rates of deaths from fentanyl among homeless individuals occurred in the hotel rooms that they had placed these individuals in. And let's see, I want to make sure I get it right. 40% of the tenderloin overdoses were also with people who were placed in a permanent housing unit, which they were using the hotels for at the time. So again, when you have these underlying issues, a house alone is not going to fix it, and that's why. And often these individuals are service resistant, and that's why it's so important to push these needed services on this population.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick statement. I just want to say I could never summarize what you just said. It was very eloquently. And you did it very well with hardly looking at a note. Do you have all the things you just said written down somewhere in a document that we can get access to?
Yeah.
Would love all your statistics. And
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I have written remarks I'll submit for the record, and also where, at Cicero, our
Sources.
lines are always open.
Okay.
We have footnotes for everything.
Footnotes,
And
it was
I had to
excellent.
shorten this, so we'll get, there's plenty more too.
yeah, and I'm sorry to hear that San Francisco has so deteriorated. It's one of my favorite cities on the West Coast, and my family is from there. So my husband's family, and so it's very sad to see what's happened to San Francisco, and I know the area really well. So.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your insight here. I suspect we'll be, introducing homelessness legislation very soon this month, and would love to get your feedback. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We're now going to turn to public comment, and we'll have up to 2 minutes apiece, and we'll probably go until 1:35. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Are we starting with any group in particular?
Just have the list.
Okay.
Oh, yes, we will start.
Okay.
The
Arizona Housing Coalition.
The Arizona Housing Coalition is recognized for 5 minutes. There's a special exception, but everybody else is getting 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Nicole Newhouse. I am the Executive Director for the Arizona Housing Coalition, and I'm grateful to be here before you. A little bit about the coalition. We represent hundreds of organizations across the state, everyone from affordable housing developers, for and nonprofit, homeless providers, mortgage lenders, individual citizens. They live in rural and urban and suburban places. They are Republican, Democrat, and Independent. They have come together in this coalition to create collective impact in the space of eliminating homelessness and ensuring that every Arizona has an affordable place to live. And they've done so in a way that is collaborative and without adhesion to a particular intervention, and have done so in partnership with the Department of Housing, who we have collectively found, willing to come to the table to find innovative solutions that work in each of our communities, whether it's the City of Mesa and a community court, or as we have done at the coalition in partnership with the Department of Veteran Services, housing homeless vets in a hotel until they can be bridged into other services. These are things that have worked. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. And we invite members and anybody else interested in joining the coalition and turning the cube with our membership, who works on the ground, who are not necessarily studying research commissioned in San Francisco, but are working in our communities to determine what actually works and what doesn't work, and how we can move closer and closer and closer to functional zero for homelessness and to ensure everybody has an affordable place to call home. So what I would like to do with a portion of my 5 minutes is yield a portion of my time to one of our member organizations, and Richard Cruz, who is the program director with the organization formerly known as the Human Services Campus, now Keys to Change.
Thank you so much, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Cruz, and I'm the Director of Programs for Keys to Change, formerly known as the Human Services Campus, the lead agency for single adult homelessness in Maricopa County, located at the epicenter of homelessness on 12th Avenue in Madison, but also working on homelessness to end homelessness across Maricopa County, not from across the state line. The majority of persons that are unsheltered are located around the campus. Yes, so that 14% thing is what he said. However, I believe that you live where you live because of the proximity to the amenities around you, right? So I would just say that, like, when we look at roughly, so there were 28,000 people that engaged services last year across Maricopa County. 14,000 of those did come through the campus. So it's about actually proximity to services. Our organization has been able to benefit from partnering closely with ADOH, recently receiving funding for out of the Housing Trust Fund to continue funding our Vespero shelter there on campus, as well as using a $10 million investment from the state to do bridge housing in the East Valley and Central City South, as well as expand our regional outreach efforts. So we are grateful for the investment. But we're in a moment where one-time investments are nice. We all enjoy when Christmas comes and we get gifts, right? However, we're in a moment where long-term investment and prioritization is needed. One of my favorite quotes of Dr. King, since we're in that season, quotes the Book of Amos stating, "Let justice flow like waters and righteousness a mighty stream." And I can hear the waters, but the waters that I hear right now are not those of justice. It's those, a flow of those coming into the system, a system that is already underfunded, and a flow of people that will have no options. Because without sustainable funding to programs, those programs are going to close down. So it's the roar of the rapids that are coming as we approach this catastrophic waterfall. And while we know that Friday's coming and the budget's going to be kind of ugly, right? We're going to have a deficit. We still must prioritize funding to stem the flow of homelessness and housing those that are in that insecurity. So it's not about treatment first. It's not about housing first. It's about housing people, right? Period. And by the way, housing first actually
30 seconds.
Works. Yes, I got you. So we can debate a new system for another day. We can debate our rules and regulations for another day. But right now, people are dying. So what I take note of is that when the building is on fire, we put it out. We put it out with water because it's proven that water works to put out fires. Similarly, so when it comes to housing first with over a 70% that success rate works. And so right now, we can't be in a space where we're going to debate all that. We have to just do what's needed, and that's prevention, that's housing, that's shelter, and that's more of it, not less. So now it's time for difficult conversations to figure out how we do more, not less, in the face of a deficit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Time's expired. All right. Mr. Kevin Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
and
committee
by the
members.
way, do we need to get that gentleman's name for the card? Okay, so that we have. Okay, thank you. Corporation Commissioner Kevin Thompson.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Thompson. I'm here today in my own individual capacity as a citizen and as a recovering council member from the city of Mesa as well. I can tell you firsthand the experiences that I've had as a council member in District 6 from 2015 to 2023, January 3rd of 2023, when I was unemployed by the city and then reemployed by the state. So there was a little bit of time there that I was unemployed. But I can tell you that I was deeply involved in a lot of the conversations that have been going on here today. I was one of those council members that approved the community courts when it first came to fruition in the city of Mesa. I was also involved in the Windermere and the funding of that through CDBG and other funding mechanisms as a temporary, at the time, way to find rapid housing for individuals, homeless individuals, so that we could meet the Boise v. Martin intent of the law, which stated basically that we had to ask if the person needed help before we could trespass them. And so that was one of the things that we were doing, is trying to find those that wanted help, that when our officers would go out and ask them if they wanted help, and if they said yes, we would tie them to either CBI or some other organization, and we'd try to get them off the street immediately, put those wraparound services
30
to
seconds.
them, and try to get them to become sustainable members of our community again. So I will leave it at that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Nope. I have just a couple.
Okay.
Just quickly, could you explain your involvement with the Grand? And were you involved with the Grand as a council member?
I was not. I'm sorry, Chair, Representative Parker. I was not. I was off council at the time. I was involved early on in a different hotel that was down by Superstition Springs Mall. I believe that was the Drury Inn. The city wanted to purchase that hotel so that they could eliminate the funding to Windermere, and so that they could get rid of the Windermere and go strictly to the Drury Inn. They ran into a lot of the same opposition that you experienced with the Grand Hotel, where you had a large community outpouring that said no, and ultimately I think it was the Superstition Springs Mall management company that found in the CCNRs that the mall couldn't, or that the hotel couldn't be used for private industry. It had to be only used for the intent and purpose that it was, and so therefore the city moved on from that. I got involved in the Grand Hotel not as a council member, but as a recovering council member, because I realized that the citizens' voice wasn't being heard, and the citizens called me and asked me if I would help them, and so I went out to gather signatures because I wanted to make sure that the citizens' voices were heard. I spent a lot of time in the neighborhood directly around the Grand Hotel, and I heard firsthand from the people that were there that they couldn't believe that the city would be bringing a homeless facility into an already depressed area. And so I went out and gathered signatures to try to force a supermajority vote of council, so that way the citizens truly would have a voice. But unfortunately, with ARS 9-462, it makes it impossible really to fight the city. I don't care who you are. I mean, we had we had 7 out of the 11 property owners, and we still didn't have enough signatures to beat the city on that. So it was very disheartening for the community to go back to them and tell them that there's nothing that we could do, even after we spent so much time, energy, and effort out talking to people and canvassing the streets, trying to get signatures from homeowners.
Right. Quick follow-up.
Quick follow-up. And again, hadn't you presented, or others presented, options of using the Mervyn's building, which was already owned by the city, which was even right by the light rail, which really would have helped the people get the services they needed easier? Yes,
that was one of the things when I was on city council. When I was on city council originally, when the hotel discussion came up for the Drury Inn, I asked if we couldn't use the Mervyn's Hotel on Stapley in Maine Stapley in Maine, I think it is, Maine or Broadway. Anyway, I think it's Maine, but I brought that up because it is on the light rail route, and so the city already owned the facility. We could have simply partitioned portions of it off, put cots in there, put beds in there. We've been able to get hundreds of people off the street immediately, and they would have had access to light rail to go to employment, to go to any of the services that they needed, which are all in our downtown corridor.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Joseph Charles. Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity. We work at the Arizona Justice Center. It's in the West Valley, so we've been hearing a lot about Mesa. We've been there over 10 years. We're seeing about 600 people a day in the downtown Glendale area. 600 a month in the downtown Glendale area. We're all volunteers. We don't receive funding from anywhere. We provide free legal services. I haven't heard that discussed, but many of the people on the street are needing of legal services, and that's a huge problem in our state. Additionally, the percentages you have talked about here are what we've found in the 10 years we've done this. About a third of the people have severe mental problems on the street, about a third are addiction, and about a third are just circumstances. What we're learning about is the models that you've been talking about. There's a book called San Francisco Sickle, and I'm sure that you probably have already seen it. There has to be a new paradigm. These hotels and stuff that they're building and stuff and you've been hearing about from that research just isn't working. What is going to be working is the services to transform. I've heard that it's got to be a transformation. The people on the street are traumatized. Now, I've not heard that word in here, but there's heavy trauma. Most of the women have been raped or hurt. There's goons on the street that have also hurt other people. We have 1,000 veterans on the street that are not receiving services. So services are huge, and early detection. We have a holistic model.
30 seconds.
We've worked with ASU West, Glendale Community College, the City of Glendale's Police Department, and others. Jeff Taylor here is, I hope, going to speak to you about some of the issues you've been hearing about. But the point is, we got to change the model to get services and decentralize programs. Our hope is to have a program in Glendale. Maryville would take 2 or 3. There are pockets of the homeless. So most of the people don't see the homeless because they don't live around them, but there are pockets of the homeless. And that's where we say the decentralized services should be. We get 1,000 pieces of mail a month, and that's vital to the people on the street. We deal with the people on the street. So that's what we're seeing, and we're trying to help. We don't do clothing, we don't do food, but we do housing, emergency housing, jobs. We can get somebody a job today.
Time.
So,
thank you very much. All right, Yvonne Cahill.
Thank you so much to the committee for allowing this hearing and having people come to speak and share their experience. So hopefully we can help solve this terrible problem. My name is Yvonne Cahill. I'm a citizen of Scottsdale. And I just wanted to bring this whole situation home. In Scottsdale, we're seeing just an explosion in homelessness. I wanted to share a case with you. On June 24th, a woman named Paulette Larwinski was attacked and sexually assaulted on the patio of an Old Town Scottsdale business in the area of Brown and First Avenue. Larwinski was found in an alley. She had been raped, robbed, and bludgeoned to death with a rock. She had been attacked on the patio of the restaurant where she often slept. She was homeless. People knew Paulette, referred to as a kind and gentle soul. Paulette was taken to the hospital in critical condition, and unfortunately she died 6 days later as a result of her injury. The police report said she was so badly beaten she was unrecognizable. The trauma was so severe. A man named Jaden Curtis, 22 years old, was arrested for her murder a month later. It came to find out that he had once been an employee at the restaurant in Old Town. At the time, Jaden was also homeless. I really want to make sure that we have measurements in place. Pardon me?
30 seconds.
Measurements in place, because what we're doing now is we're providing homes, and you have a drug addiction, you're just a drug addicted, sheltered person. If you have a mental problem and you provided homes, you're just a sheltered person with a mental problem. So I really thank the committee for allowing us to speak, and I really hope that we solve this problem, because we have a 25% problem with mental illness and 35% with drug addiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Christian Solorio, and then on deck, is Christian here? No? Okay. Next up is Lena Avalos.
I'd like to yield my time to one of our members, if I can do that.
Sure.
And she's signed into RTS, Camille Lane.
Camille Lang. Okay. Go ahead, Camille.
Hello, committee and chair. Thank you for your time. My name is Camille Lang, with an I-N-G, and I am a single mother and currently grappling with the intense burden of rising costs of rent in Arizona. Okay, I am here to share my personal story with you all and advocate for critical measures that can help us alleviate the housing crisis affecting many families like mine. Okay, as a single mother, providing a stable and secure home is super important important for me and my little one. She's my top priority. However, the escalating rent prices have made this increasingly challenging for me and my family. Last year, I was on the verge of being homeless after losing my job as an educator. Okay, facing eviction, I was able to receive support from ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the federal program, and it did alleviate temporarily for my family and provide us temporary support. Now, without it, we would have been evicted and homeless, and given the situation that I am in, I would have lost my daughter. Okay. The first step I think that we can take to actually solve this is the restoration of permanent and annual funding for Arizona's Housing Trust Fund. Adequate funding
30
for
seconds.
housing assistance programs is crucial to providing relief for families like mine and preventing homelessness. By investing in these programs, we can create a more sustainable and secure future for vulnerable families. The second step we can take is implementing statewide rent stabilization. We have to work to prohibit landlords from raising rent prices excessively and exploiting the financial conditions that are currently happening in this economy. Okay, this would go a
Your
long
time
way.
has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jan Dubowskis. And then following is Joel Copeland, C-O-P-L-I-N. Ms. Dubowskis, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having the hearing today and for us having the opportunity to come speak before you. I'm a resident of the city of Scottsdale, and what I have found in Scottsdale, I think, is what we've talked about before in these hearings. There's a lot going on in Scottsdale, and you wouldn't expect that from our city. I live in far north Scottsdale, an area where we don't have bus service. I've never seen homeless people in the 10 years that I've lived there until the last 2 months. We've seen two gentlemen walking around with blankets over their heads in an area that is not suitable for the homeless. Like you said, Representative Schweibert, they're expanding and going outside of the areas of comfort, and who knows why, but it's certainly something that is a cause for concern. These are also people who don't fit that criteria of single moms, veterans, the elderly. These are people who need help. And so I hope that among the considerations for this committee is not only how we can help the vulnerable, but also those who don't appear vulnerable but are, which are those single men who are out there as well. Thank you very much for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Copeland? Okay, not here. All right. Next up is Denise Preveet. Please correct me if I got it wrong.
Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak here today. I know how precious our tax dollars are, and I understand the push and pull from many who want those dollars used for certain projects. But I tell you this one thing. There is no better investment of our tax dollars than to help Arizonans to own a home. The desire to own a home and live the American dream knows no political affiliation. Homelessness is not confined to Democrats or Republicans, and neither should be the desire to put people in homes where they can not only live but thrive. They can contribute to our society and have a sense of pride. Homes that people make improvements to and invest in. Homes that can create some wealth from. Wanting to leave something to your children isn't a Democrat or a Republican thing, it's an American thing. When our tax dollars are used to help people to buy a home, it's not a handout, it's a hand up. And so investing in our communities, our cities, and our state, it raises us all up. Arizona has the 4th highest overall unhoused population in this country. That's shameful. There is so much wealth in this state and so much wealth that flies in and out of Arizona. For us to have the 4th highest homeless rate in the nation should shame every politician into action to overcome the divisions that prevent you from working together to end what we see just down the street from this building. This building full of people who have been elected to work for us to make our lives better regardless of political affiliation. Some say people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but that's pretty difficult when you have no bootstraps, even though you've been working your whole life. I've been working since I was 15 years old. I am no slouch. Things are tough out there, and people are willing to work hard, but they need to know there's something working so hard for.
Thank you. Next up is Carrie Davis, followed by Pamela Carter.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair of Grease and City Council or Council committee members. The January 2023 East Valley homeless point-in-time count includes 11 cities. The population for the East Valley is approximately 1.6 million. Mesa and Tempe represent approximately 43% of, and the other 9 cities represent approximately 57%. According to the January 2023 point-in-time count, I estimate Mesa and Tempe service over 70% of the East Valley homeless population. The purchase of the Grand Hotel in Mesa disincentivizes the other East Valley cities from doing their fair share of providing services for the homeless. In September 2021, the City of Tempe, their council, approved $450,000 in nonprofit grants to expand emergency shelter beds for those experiencing homelessness for 62 beds. 32 of those beds at the East Valley Men's Center, operated by a New Leaf. Individuals will be transported directly to the Mesa shelter, where they will receive shelter, case management, and the transportation will be provided by Tempe Human Services. This is an example of how Mesa's neighbors overburden our community with homeless. I recommend you consider providing incentives for other cities to develop homeless services that aren't doing their fair share to address homeless. I've had several random interactions with homeless people in Mesa. They predominantly are not
30
from
seconds.
Mesa. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today.
Right, thank you. Next up is Pamela Carter, and then next up is Ben Shield.
Chairman Grant, Gruss, and committee members. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having this hearing. I am a 4th generation native Arizonan, and I have a family full of military. Some of them have actually died in combat. So, and they were all Arizonans. So I have, it really pains my heart when I'm driving down the street and I see a veteran holding a sign in a wheelchair with no limbs. This is a travesty in Arizona. I fully supporting our vets and the other priorities that our representatives have mentioned, the single moms. I was raised by a single mom. And though we were not homeless, I have a heart for families, children as well, but I'm here primarily to speak for the vets. It is unconscionable that we have allowed this. So thank you so much, and I would appreciate prioritizing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Shield. All right. Priscilla Moore. Okay. Andrea Luna Cervantes. Okay. Jessica Berg. Okay. All right. Nicole Newhouse has already spoken, right? Yeah. Carrie Jackson.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'm Carrie Jackson, and I'm just representing myself. I support the amount of money that we got into the 2024 budget, and I support the additional money, and I support all the proposals that the governor had. And I believe that everybody, I mean, let me back up just a minute, but it was just the bare bones. I mean, it was just shoring up for those who have already fallen, and we can do more. And I believe that everybody in this room holds in regard the preamble of the federal Constitution, and ensuring the domestic tranquility is to show mercy, and to provide for the common defense is to stop the abuse, and to promote the general welfare at the end, the neglect, and to secure the blessings of liberty is to act with grace. And I'm asking this body to do so, because we can do so much more. You know, like the City of Phoenix passage of a prevailing wage, it went far beyond it. It secures that all construction workers would get a living wage that works under that contract, and that would keep them inside of their homes. And that Representative Sun, you know, she had a bill last year to assist our vulnerable seniors to be able to pay the property tax, and it wasn't even allowed to even go to a committee. Yet in this same room, we discussed and debated municipal zoning, taking it away from the cities and giving it to contractors, who we have hundreds of years of data showing that their main issue is the bottom line, but that government, being completely and totally other than government, was created to assist and to help and provide for all that are governed. I realize that we have a limited tax base, but if this body could tax corporations to pay their fair share, then we would have a whole lot more money to be able to help and assist and provide for all that
Thank
are
you.
governed.
Jeff Taylor, you were referenced earlier on. Do you want to say something for the record, or are you good?
I think.
And we'll need to get you to. We'll get a sign-up sheet, but I know you were referenced, and we're wrapping up, I think. So, go ahead.
Well, you're stuck with me, I guess, to wrap things up.
Yeah.
I think the best thing I can do, Mr. Chair and members, is to answer a few questions that were brought up, and one was Sublocade and Suboxone in treatment centers. Most people will elect to, you're feeling pretty miserable. Right now we're dealing with a fentanyl crisis. Just to put this into perspective, and I'm talking about people that are chronically homeless, living on the streets because of a drug addiction. I'm not talking about Mrs. Ling, and that's a whole other population that we serve. Incidentally, I chair the board of the Salvation Army for the Western United States. We serve that population. But guess what? We drug test in that program too. We have children there. So we drug test all of our people coming into any of our programs, because just because you're a mom with kids doesn't mean that you have a drug problem, don't have a drug problem. The number one reason for child removal in the state of Arizona, one or both parents are addicted to drugs or alcohol. So we make sure, now we drug test not to put people out on the street, we drug test to get the services that they need. We've been doing this a long time. We've been in the state of Arizona for 120 years. And we were here before, actually our first office was a bar downtown called the Road to Ruin Saloon. That's classic, I love that name of the saloon. So I just want to emphasize that when you have a 50-cent fentanyl pill that's being sold on the streets of Tucson and in some of the outlying areas, it's about $1 here in the city of Phoenix. We had a crisis under Governor Ducey, a state of emergency for OxyContin.
30 seconds.
Basically, it's the same thing. OxyContin is an opiate, and now we have fentanyl, which replaced it. At the time of our state of emergency, that was a $40 to $60 pill on the streets. Now that pill is $1 or less. This is a crisis. So we need to drug test. We do treatment first. It's highly effective, and the most effective pathway for our clients is the criminal justice system, not outlawing homelessness, Representative Schwiebert, but outlawing sexual assault on women, which is happening on the streets of Phoenix.
Okay, time.
Aggravated assault on individuals. Not outlawing homelessness, but the crime that comes along with it.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and we'll do closing comments. Representative Schwiebert.
Okay, thank you so much to everybody for being here, and I really appreciated the comments of not only our experts in the field of housing and homelessness, but also our experts in the experience of housing and homelessness across all spectrums. Whether you are here to testify because you have been on the edge of eviction, or whether you're here to testify because you have experience with people who are addicted, I guess the bottom line of what I want to say, I'm throwing away my notes here, is that the gentleman from Keys to Change talked about when the house is on fire, you get a hose and you work together to put out the fire. So we need to stop arguing about you're not doing it right, you're not doing it right. make sure that we are investing properly, that we are taking our responsibility seriously as legislators to make sure that we are getting rents, increasing rents under control, that we're making housing more affordable. It is the American dream. It's not a Democrat or a Republican dream. It's the American dream. And to make sure that we are investing in those treatment programs, to make sure that people are getting the mental health treatment, that they are getting the substance abuse treatment and any other addiction treatment that they need. For too long, Arizona has turned its head. Look no farther than ASH, the Arizona State Hospital, and the way that has been neglected for years and years, and services have been just inadequate because we're falling down on the job. So we need to find ways to work together to make sure that we're addressing the myriad of issues that we see around homelessness. As the Department of Housing said earlier, they have just begun to roll out a lot of the funding, and it's so crucial that we continue that funding, because all that progress will just quickly be reversed if we don't continue to make those investments. So you will see a lot of legislation this year. Representative Quinones is running a first-time homebuyers program to help people get into home ownership. Others are running rent stabilization bills. All of us are trying to pitch in and make sure that we are addressing this, but let's work together rather than working against each other.
Representative Parker.
Yes, thank you very much. And I echo everything that's been said, and I want to thank all of you for coming, for bringing your voice, bringing your testimony, bringing your feelings. We see you, we hear you. I left the parking lot last night at 11:45. I was the last car on the entire Capitol complex working on bills for every issue you just brought up. And our beef in Mesa was the problem, was the communication and the honesty with the citizens, because what we want and what we were hoping for in Mesa was a compassionate choice of stability. And that beautiful Camille, if she's still here, said it, stable and secure.
Well, thank you all for being here today and for the speakers. I appreciate the Department of Housing, certainly the City of Mesa, the Cicero Institute, the Joint Legislative Budget Committee staff, and all of the advocates who've lived the experience of homelessness and who are also standing up for those who are experiencing homelessness. I really think that there are three areas, and Jared kind of stole my fire here, but there is certainly the top focus of any policies around homelessness have to be framed in compassion, and they have to have heart. And legislation that ignores the shackles of addiction or mental illness, to me, lack the heart that people who need the healing truly deserve. And we also know that homelessness is not the same across the board, as we've discussed a number of times. And unfortunately, I feel like some of our responses, they're not as flexible of resources as the people who need them. So when we're thinking about placing folks who are suffering from addiction and mental illness in the same shelter as those families and kids and seniors and veterans who may not face the same kinds of demons that individuals who otherwise might be facing, we have to recognize that one size of treatment and intervention doesn't fit. And finally, we have a responsibility to know that these resources are working. We can throw out percentages all day long, but I think we need a fair and neutral arbiter to determine whether our interventions are working, to what extent, and the timeliness of those outcomes. Community courts cannot continue to see your frequent flyers over and over and over again. That is the definition of insanity, to repeat and fail and repeat the same failed intervention over again. So I do believe that if we truly care about moving the ball forward when it comes to homelessness, we have to consider the heart that's required, the variety of interventions that are needed. We on this side of the aisle are not saying that treatment and everybody is addicted to drugs and have mental illness. We need the other side of the aisle to say that we agree that housing's not the only thing. We heard nothing but rising rents and housing, and that rent stabilization, I suspect many in this audience would be in favor of rent control. Those are not the path forward here exclusively as well. We have to recognize that we both have the same common goal to provide stability and prosperity for Arizonans, and I think we can get it done. I think we can have the resolve. And make no mistake, there will be plenty of legislation on this topic come the end of the month. Thank you all for coming, and without objection, the committee is adjourned.